Welcome to the Complete Street Commission's August 14th regular commission meeting. This is a hybrid meeting with commission members, city staff, and members of the public participating in accordance with public health guidelines. I would like to introduce Complete Street Commission members and city staff present. I'm Chair Sally Cole. Commissioners present include Meredith Bergen Bailey, Brian Altman, Jackie Sebrian, and Athena Irakomos. Commissioners absent include Elizabeth King and Matthew Raskoff. City staff present include Matthew Hui and Kevin Chen. Matthew, would you please provide instructions to the commission and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Yes, thank you, Chair Cole and members of the Complete Streets Commission. Welcome everyone to the August 14th Complete Streets Commission meeting, and thank you for attending. For members of the public who wish to provide public comment for any item on tonight's agenda, after the chair calls for public comment on that item, virtual attendees on Zoom may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. That concludes the instructions, and I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. For reports and announcements, city staff and commission members may communicate general information of interest regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the commission. No commission discussion or action can occur on any of the presented items. Kevin, do you have any reports and announcements?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of those rare occasions that we had city council meetings, however, it had no transportation items. So with that, I will conclude my announcement. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're moving on to public comment. Under public comment, members of the public may address the Complete Streets Commission on any subject that is not listed on tonight's agenda. Each speaker may address the commission once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. You are not required to provide your name or city of residence, but it is helpful. The commission cannot act on items not listed on the agenda, and therefore, the commission cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. Matthew, would you please call for general public comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment, you may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. Seeing no virtually raised hands, I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to regular business. Under regular business, the commission considers recommendations from city staff on policy matters or administrative actions that require commission approval. The first regular business item tonight is accept the Complete Streets Commission minutes from the meeting of July 10th, 2024. Do I have any clarification questions from the commission before I take public comment on the minutes from last month's meeting? Okay. Matthew, can you please call for public comments on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment, you may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you are participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. Seeing no virtually raised hands, I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Does anyone have any feedback on the minutes or anything else? I would move to make a motion to approve the minutes. I just wanted to clarify quickly. I know Jackie wasn't there for the discussion around the subcommittee, so we're going to have that discussion later in this meeting. So I just want to make everyone aware. And I had a few comments as well, but the agenda minutes do reflect, in my opinion, the discussion of last meeting. Do I have a second? Great. Thank you, Commissioner Altman.
Okay,
Kev, go ahead.
thank you. So we do have a motion and a second on the table. For those commissioners that would like to vote yes, if you can please raise your hand. Okay, great. And then I see abstaining from Commissioner Sebrian.
Oh, that's right. And abstain.
Yeah, I mean,
I think that's
technically,
right.
if you read the minutes and you watch the meeting and they reflect, you could vote if you've done those actions, yes.
That's probably good. All right. Great. All right. Now we move on to item E2 that we are going to receive an update on the town of Atherton's El Camino Real Complete Streets Study. It's very interesting. Staff Senior Transportation Engineer Christian Choi is going to introduce this item. Thank you, Christian.
Hi, good evening,
Hi.
Chair Cole, Complete Streets Commissioners, Christiane Choi, Senior Transportation Engineer with the city's Transportation Division. And tonight we're here to present on the Atherton's El Camino Real Complete Streets Study. And I'm joined here in person with Carolyn Mamarado from the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. She's the project manager for the project. And then also remotely, Michaela Sword with the project team consultant will also be helping to present.
Oh,
So-
great. Is she dialed in?
Yeah, she's
Super.
on the Zoom call. So
I'm sorry. Can you repeat your name? The person you introduced?
Hi, good afternoon. Carolyn Mamaradlo,
Carolyn. And did you say you're from the county?
San Mateo County Transportation Authority. We're
Perfect.
a funding partner.
Great. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Christiane, for the introduction, and good afternoon, commission members. Again, my name is Carolyn Mamaradlo. I'm with the San Mateo County Transportation Authority. And our presentation, I'll first cover some background information on the study and share some highlights from the existing conditions analysis we've been doing. And then I'll hand it off to my colleague, Michaela, who's on Zoom, to really cover the focus of our presentation, which is what we heard from our initial community engagement. So with that, next slide. All right. So I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, but just to make sure we're all on the same page by what we mean with complete streets. This is providing mobility options for people of all ages and abilities to make a safer, more balanced, livable street. This includes expanding travel options for modes other than driving, such as walking, biking, and riding transit. Next slide. And the segment we're studying is about 1.5 miles between Selby Lane and Valparaiso Avenue. The study was awarded competitive grant funding through the TA's Call for Projects because we recognize this as an important gap closure for a regional corridor that serves many users across the county. And the study is really just the first step in ultimately constructing improvements on El Camino Real. Once the study is complete, we'll be using the plan to inform the next phase in cooperation with Caltrans, who owns and operates the state highway, to develop a project initiation document. So our overarching goals for this study include, first and foremost, safety. We're striving to improve safety while also ensuring quality of life and considering the character that makes this part of ECR and Town of Atherton unique. We'll also be working towards improving connectivity to and from key services, community resources, and employment centers. And this is with a focus on equity and prioritizing communities in most need. This may include people who are transit dependent, communities with lower rates of car ownership, and limited mobility. And finally,
Can you repeat those three things? That was really interesting to hear. You said equity and the 3 points.
people who are transit dependent.
Yep.
Communities with lower car ownership and limited mobility.
Thank you.
And finally, providing more options to get around without having to rely on private automobile. So we kicked off the study earlier this year in January and have been developing our existing conditions analysis. And we'll use those findings to develop the initial concepts in the fall and finally have a preferred concept of as early as 2025. So throughout this process, We'll continue our community engagement activities to inform our analyses at each milestone along the way.
Carolyn, on the preferred concept, does that mean that it would be installed then, or the decision about what the preferred concept would be finalized?
It would be the latter, so a consensus on one of
Okay.
the alternatives that we'll be studying.
Thank you.
Speaking to the regional nature of the corridor, this is a collaboration between several agencies. So as I mentioned, TA or SMCTA is a major funding contributor through the Measure A Ped and Bike program. And we're also providing technical assistance to the town to implement the study. We also have funding match contributions from the town as well as Menlo Park and Samtrans. All right, so just a few highlights from our ongoing existing conditions analysis to highlight some of the constraints and opportunities along this stretch of El Camino Real. This diagram illustrates some of the network gaps. So generally, there are 3 traffic lanes in each direction, except for the section around Valparaiso, Glenwood Avenue, where it changes to 2 lanes in each direction. There is some on-street parking at both ends of the segment, but only on one side of the street along the northbound direction. And there are no dedicated bike facilities in this area. And sidewalks are only on one side of the street in the northbound direction with a gap between Stockbridge and Watkins. And it's important to note that this serves several bus stops for Samtrans's highest ridership route, ECR route. So to better visualize the conditions, particularly the walking conditions in this area, we see here really long crossing distances for pedestrians, having to face 6 travel lanes of traffic. And this really shows how vulnerable pedestrians are walking along the roadway shoulder with no buffer or vertical barriers.
What is that intersection, the bottom right, the yield here? What road is that? Do you know?
I unfortunately don't recall.
Selby, looks like Selby.
And is it, like, it's actually like 7 lanes of traffic because one of them's a turn.
That's right.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So we also looked at 5-year statewide data on reported crashes along the segment. Between 2018 and 2022, there were a total of 73 crashes reported, with 14 total, which is almost 20% of all crashes involving bicyclists and pedestrians. 2 of these did result in fatalities when a pedestrian was hit cross and another walking in the roadway. So really what this data shows is a disproportionate risk for those walking and biking. All right, so with that, I'll now pass it over to Michaela to share insights we gained from the community on the ways and experiences that they have in the corridor.
Great, thank you, Carolyn. Hi, everyone, Madam Chair and members of the Complete Streets Commission. My name is Michaela Sword. I'm a senior consultant with WSP. We were retained to support the town of Atherton and the SMCTA in this study, and I was responsible for overseeing the outreach and public engagement for this project. To date, we've completed the public engagement for phase 1, so we'd love to share with you some of the results of what we heard throughout our extensive engagement and outreach phase. Just to set a baseline for everyone's understanding, the objectives for phase 1 outreach to the public were to establish why the study is needed in this area and to identify which problems the study aims to address. Also gaining insights on some of the experiences from residents, commuters, and businesses along El Camino Real, some of the challenges that they experienced moving along this corridor, and where some of the opportunities are to improve the infrastructure. We also offer the opportunity to answer any questions from the public about the study and to provide information about what we're doing. To summarize the outreach tactics for phase 1, we had a project website that is still active today, with resources to the multilingual fact sheet and FAQ documents for the public. We also hosted an online survey and an interactive map where we asked members of the community to drop markers to either identify challenging areas or destinations that they would like to travel more by foot, by bike, by transit if conditions were improved. And we'll go over that in a moment. We had 3 focused listening sessions with various key stakeholders along this corridor, including some of the local schools that are along El Camino Real. We had 3 pop-up events within the community to go to where the people are and to make sure that we're hearing from a diversity of residents and businesses. We also held 2 CBO meetings, which are meetings with community-based organizations to ensure that we're hearing from a diverse audience. We also had our first technical working group, of which Christiane Choi was a member, to provide some technical input on the study. And we held 1 virtual community meeting that was open to everyone to attend. Next slide, please.
Kayla, before you move on, can I ask a couple questions about the outreach?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. How, and maybe others can help, but how were these things publicized? Obviously, with a focused listening session, you're reaching out to a specific target group. But in
Mhm.
terms of how did the public know about the online survey, the virtual community meeting, things like that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. For the online survey and the interactive map, those were linked primarily through the town and the county's social media accounts. We had also promoted them through some of our partners that are listed here, the CBO organizations, also members of our technical working group, which includes neighboring cities, to help share the word and spread that link within the public. We promoted them at some of the earlier in-person pop-up events within the community. And I believe we also boosted some paid ads through the town's social media website that were geo-targeted to this area.
Oh, okay. And also with the project webpage, was that on the Atherton's, City Atherton's website?
That's correct. So the main homepage for the project is hosted on the Town of Atherton's website, and it takes you to our engagement site where folks can provide feedback.
Okay. Thank you.
Just a
Yes,
quick
go.
question.
Commissioner
What, I think this is great. What type of indicators do you use for, like the success of these engagement tactics? You know, like hits on the webpage or like, how do you know how many people you're reaching?
Absolutely. For some of our digital tactics, which we'll get into in a few moments, for example, the online survey and the map, it's very qualitative. We have the number of responses that we received and the number of individual users who engaged on that site or provided feedback. For the in-person digital meetings, we do measure the success there by how many attendees attended the focused listening sessions and CBO meetings, and from which organization or agency that they're representing. For example, with the focused listening sessions, there were a mix of school administrators in the area, Safe Routes to School organizers, and some of the local advocacy groups for cycling as well.
Uh-huh. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. And please feel free to jump in with questions as we go.
Can't stop us.
No problem. Sorry, I'm just gathering my bearings here. All right, so we'll start by summarizing some of the feedback that we collected through both in-person and digital meetings, and then we'll move into survey responses as well. So we've organized our feedback into 5 themes. We'll start with pedestrian safety and pedestrian infrastructure, bicycle lanes and cyclist safety, public transportation and bus stops, followed by flooding, which is also within the purview of the study, and then finally traffic and driver experience. So to kick us off with the pedestrian safety and infrastructure comments, we received many comments that the pedestrian safety needs need to be improved overall within this stretch. Community members had raised significant concerns about the quality of the pedestrian infrastructure along El Camino Real itself, and many community members pointed out the risks of crossing the multiple lanes, as we mentioned previously, and that crosswalks that are currently built are often ignored by drivers. And pedestrians also called for more crosswalks with perhaps more protection, such as flashing lights or refuges midway throughout the crossings for safety.
Mhm.
We also heard many people stressing how it is dangerous to walk along the corridor especially without lighting at night or the early morning hours when there are many people who are trying to get to work. And a couple highlights that relate to Menlo Park and the sort of the south end of our study. There were a few comments also identifying dangerous driving conditions and conditions for pedestrians and cyclists navigating the intersection at Alejandra Avenue. This includes some of the school administrators at Menlo College, for example, who stressed that there's lack of traffic control in this area creates a heightened risk, especially during the school pickup and drop-off hours when it's quite congested in these areas. Furthermore, there was a comment about the intersection at Valparaiso Avenue, which is a high traffic area. And drivers who are trying to avoid the congestion along Santa Cruz usually choose this route. And there are often folks who are reported to be speeding above the posted speed limit, which can cause concern for pedestrians and cyclists and increases the risk for them. A couple points we wanted to raise here. The community did call for continuous sidewalks along both sides of the corridor. As you saw previously, there are no sidewalks currently on the southbound side of El Camino. Improved street level lighting, more crosswalk protections as we've noted, and safe and accessible paths to bus stops along the corridor. Next slide, please. Next, we'll look at bicycle lanes and safety concerns that relate to that. Many community members expressed a willingness to travel more by bike if the infrastructure were improved to create safe cycling experience. We talked with local school administrators and Safe Routes to Schools coordinators who offered different opinions on whether the improved biking and pedestrian infrastructure on El Camino would lead to an increase in students and staff members who use active transportation along this route. And this was mostly because they cited that some parents would be hesitant to allow their children to bike along El Camino Real, regardless of how the bicycle facilities were improved. And that may be due to a perception currently that it's unsafe to travel along that corridor. Some of the key suggestions to make the corridor more bike-friendly includes replacing some of the dirt paths that currently exist with paved sidewalks, improving the street level lighting again, adding protected bicycle lanes and improving connectivity to other segments of the corridor, and narrowing or reducing traffic lanes to make more space for bike lanes in this stretch. Next slide, please. All right, and what we heard about public transportation and bus stops. So we did hear, particularly we did host one listening session with the North Fair Oaks Community Council, and we heard from many of their community members and the surrounding equity priority communities who depend on El Camino Real, the bus service along that route to commute to work, to run errands, and to move through the larger region. Some participants mentioned that the lack of lighting at bus stops, drivers don't always see them waiting for those stops and can be passed up, which is inconvenient for them and disrupts their trip planning as well. Some participants also highlighted issues with the bus service reliability itself, including delays and inaccurate schedule times. And some spoke about how the unreliable bus service could negatively affect their ability to get to work or other time-sensitive destinations. I did want to highlight as well through our conversations, there was one example cited for the bus stop outside of Menlo College campus. And the school administrators that we spoke to noted that often there's no paved sidewalk that leads to that bus stop currently. And when it rains, it just further amplifies the issue and the difficulty trying to get to that bus stop. It can create pooling water or muddy conditions where people are forced to walk into the roadway lanes to get to that bus stop safely. Generally, community members shared concerns about a lack of visibility and lighting around bus stops, potentially difficulty accessing those during rain, as I just mentioned, and unreliable bus service, including delays and scheduling. I'll pause if there are any questions at this point, and we just have a few photos that were taken during our focus groups. This one is one of our CBO meetings with the El Concilio group. All right, please proceed to the next slide.
I'm sorry, Mikhail, I did have a question when I saw that picture. So
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
because you were looking at the experience of people riding public transit, were some of the community-based organizations not located in Atherton?
So our first attempt was to outreach to CBOs that were based in Atherton. It is a small geographic area, so we did have to extend our reach to consider partners within the surrounding area. So, for example, one of the CBO members that we work with had an office closer to Palo Alto, but a
Mhm.
lot of their membership and their constituents either live and work in Atherton or pass through this area along El Camino.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. All right. The fourth topic here, flooding along El Camino Real. Generally, these comments included concerns about traffic that may be worsening and the experience commuting by car. In particular, the flooding issues along El Camino impact drivers more as well as they're commuting by car. Potential to force pedestrians and cyclists into the roadway along the road shoulder, which is amplified by the lack of sidewalk infrastructure. Many of the dirt paths, as we've mentioned, can get quite muddy, which cause accessibility issues, and especially around bus stops. For example, the one outside Menlo College, where it would be difficult to travel to if someone with a wheelchair or mobility device were trying to access that on a rainy day. Next slide, please. In terms of traffic and driver experience, drivers emphasize that the lack of lighting along the corridor can make it difficult for drivers to see pedestrians walking, and that additional lighting would also make them feel safer while driving along this segment. Drivers described congestion caused by cars that are attempting to turn left onto the corridor. We did hear this quite a bit, that some of the turning conditions and visibility are currently not safe or not perceived as safe. Participants had asked for either an increase in the protection for left turns or perhaps a decrease in the intersections where left turns are permitted. Community members also shared that as drivers, it can be stressful when their pedestrians are forced to walk onto the shoulder of the road because of narrow or lack of sidewalks. Many had advocated for reduced traffic along this section, and some of the school administrators stressed that the speeding and sometimes they've observed unsafe maneuvering, which heightens risk for students during the pickup and drop-off windows. Some were also concerned about whether parking would be reduced, while others provided comments that they would support reduced parking, as drivers getting out of their cars would sometimes force drivers to swerve out of their lane to make space for opening doors. And
Michaela, is the parking on the corridor outside businesses?
there's street parking along the northbound side of the corridor, along the north and south ends of the study area. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, I was just trying to understand if the parking was there for local businesses or if it was, like, is that where the parking is located? The limited parking that there is, the street parking. I think it's outside local business.
I do believe it correlates with the concentration of businesses. I know that we had canvassed some of the businesses along the study to let them know that we were holding a community meeting, for example, and those are concentrated on the north and south ends on the north side of the corridor. So I'm not sure if that's the origin of the street parking, but it does correlate with the commercial areas.
Thank
you. All right, and if you can go to the next slide, please. Now we want to shift into what we heard through the online survey and the activity map. So we had collected feedback through the online survey and received about 320 responses. This was advertised again within the local geography of Atherton and the surrounding cities and unincorporated areas. On the activity map on our website, we also received 59 markers that were added, and respondents were asked to either show challenging places where conditions could be improved that are noted with the orange thumbs down symbol, and then also destinations where they would like to travel if conditions were improved, which is marked by the thumbs up symbol there in dark blue. The online survey was promoted through the town's website, as we've mentioned, through social media posts, shared by some of our funding partners in neighboring cities, and promoted our in-person and virtual events. We had also drafted an outreach letter that went directly to local businesses along the corridor to invite them to attend and to take the survey. And we also posted temporary signage along the bus stops on El Camino Real that were installed within the study area. Next slide, please.
Sorry, I think one thing's quite interesting about that, what you just showed, is that the thumbs up signs are around like business areas. So the one on the right is right around that sort of Cafe Baroni, British Bankers Club, Menlo Park, and then that cluster there on the left at Fifth Avenue and El Camino is all the like gas station and the supermarket there and everything. So it's interesting that people are saying they would go to those places more.
Yes, that's right. And we do have a map on one of the next slides here that will show that in a bit more detail, but definitely the local businesses were one of the popular destinations. The Atherton Public Library and the park, Holbrook Park,
Yeah,
were also cited several times by many people.
thank you.
And downtown Atherton, or rather downtown Menlo Park and downtown Redwood City were destinations for folks as well. All right, next slide, please. To summarize what we heard through the survey, we did prepare a series of graphics and maps to help synthesize this information based on the data that we collected. So the map on the screen here, it represents the survey responses where members of the public had cited a particular collision or a near miss within their community. Again, these results are self-reported by the public, and we recognize that although our technical analysis includes data from the statewide integrated traffic record system, not all incidents get reported, especially near misses. And this was meant to capture any safety issues from a community-based perspective only, and does not include any of the data that we'd received on the technical side of our analysis. So as you can see, markers on the map were combined with the data that we received both from the survey. So any mention of a particular location or intersection was mapped here. There are certainly a spike of reported incidents at the intersection of Selby Lane. That's sort of the hotspot that you see on the left side of the graph here. But there were also incidents that were reported closer to Valparaiso and along, I believe this is Fair Oaks Lane and Atherton Avenue, which is the darker purple concentration in the middle. Any other questions about this graph or any other content we've gone through so far?
Yeah, I do have a question. This, what's, I think the heat diagram is really cool, but what's the magnitude between the dark spot at Selby versus maybe another hot spot? Is it 10-fold, 100-fold, 2-fold?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have the total number of map markers in front of me, but as I mentioned, we had 59 points that were added on the map itself, and I believe we added another 50 or so comments that were taken from the qualitative comments that we received. I'm not sure this isn't an exact answer, but
Yeah, what's your feel?
The lighter blue areas represent maybe 1 or 2 incidents that reported. The more concentrated hotspots could be anywhere from maybe 15 to 20. I know that there were quite a few that cited Selby Lane and the ECR.
Thanks.
All right, next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we also mapped some of the specific locations where the public had called for specific traffic improvements. So these are areas where conditions could be improved. We organized these by the categories that you see in the legend on the left. So the blue dots are lack of bike lanes, where people had cited a need for bike lanes in particular. The light green dots are locations where is a desire to see an improved crosswalk condition. The darker green dots are where intersection improvements may be required from a driving perspective, where there may be unsafe conditions or, like we mentioned, visibility challenges for making left turns, for example. The sort of light pink dots represent lack of sidewalks that were cited as an issue, and red where traffic calming was desired, where folks mentioned that often drivers are speeding, they would love to see speeds reduced. So as you can see, we did want to note there was one call to improve intersections closer to Valparaiso Ave, and just citing that there are unsafe conditions and sometimes cars don't actually stop at the traffic lights there. On the right, we also canvassed the public for any desired destinations where they would go if conditions were improved. So you can see here, this will help to also highlighted that the Atherton Public Library, Holbrook Palmer Park, downtown Menlo Park, Menlo College was cited by either current students or parents who would like their students to go there in the future, or rather their children to go there as students in the future. And they would love for them to be able to walk or bike to those locations. So how will this feedback be used by our team? This will help our team to understand potentially where pedestrian crossings would best serve people's needs based on where they're trying to get to go. Several respondents also identified a need for better connectivity to downtown Menlo Park as a destination and the surrounding local stores and restaurants. All right, and we just have one other slide. If you want to go to the next one, please. We wanted to highlight one of the main questions in our online survey, which was, what are your top priorities for improving travel along El Camino Real? The survey included several other questions, but this was sort of the meat of our survey that we wanted to get to with members of the public. So as you can see, the top three priorities that were voted on included safety for pedestrians as the highest, followed closely by safety for cyclists, and then the third most voted for or selected option was safety for drivers. So safety is most certainly the common thread here in terms of what people would like to see resulting from improvements for infrastructure. I'll just go through the other categories here so you can understand what other priorities were included. Following safety for drivers, it was slower vehicle traffic, more pedestrian crossings, less vehicle traffic, better lighting, improved bus service or access to bus stops, less flooding, and then on the lower end here, we had better landscaping and the maintenance of or maintaining street parking along El Camino Real. So these comments were received mostly through pop-up events. Overall, the safety for pedestrians, cyclists, and drivers were ranked the highest. There was a lower concern for maintaining street parking as one of the priorities here. That was mentioned through some of the comments we received at in-person pop-up events that parking should be maintained. I'll also note that we did canvass businesses along the corridor and welcome them to participate in the study and to attend our community meeting. And we did speak with a few business owners as well when we were out along El Camino canvassing that morning. So that concludes the summary of our results from the engagement and outreach period. I'll welcome any questions that you may have.
Any questions from commissioners?
I do have one. With I believe that the effort to put bike lanes all throughout El Camino within the multiple communities near us, I believe has been approved. Can any member of the team speak to how the proposal here and some of the improvements that the community here has indicated that they would like, how will that tie in to kind of the broader improvements and the bike lanes for El Camino?
Sure. Just to clarify, the effort that you're referring to, is that the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition campaign, or I know there's also a Peninsula Bikeway plan that was approved a couple of years ago.
I'm thinking of the more recent. I know Palo Alto has already approved bike lanes along their portion of El Camino. My understanding is that Samtrans is very interested in continuing that through Menlo Park, Redwood City, including the corridor that we're talking about. So just wondering, like, how will those kind of coalesce together?
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, Samtrans is a partner on this study, so we're working closely with them to make sure that any work that they've already done or are currently doing is getting considered. We're not, redoing work that's already been done. I've also worked very closely with Christiane to make sure we're considering plans that the city has already approved with the El Camino Real corridor study that was approved. So I believe that study recommended buffered bike lanes along the segment adjacent to town of Atherton. So we'll certainly be ensuring that the recommendation from this study will tie into that facility seamlessly, and there won't be any gaps. Mhm. We did just have a concluding slide as well.
I got a conceptual question, not specifically related to this, related to Vision Zero. Let's see if I can get the logic here. The average bike on the side streets is maybe 25 miles an hour. We're going to put it on a highway that's going 50 miles an hour. So that's really double the speed differential between a bike and a car, which quadruples, if I do my math right, quadruples the kinetic energy, right? So there's potentially a much higher risk of a severe injury or a fatality, maybe triple the risk. I'm just curious, does that come up in the thinking, or what am I getting wrong, I guess, from a Vision Zero perspective? If speed itself is one of the major factors for fatalities and injuries.
Yeah, that's a great point, and thank you for raising that. We did hear a lot from the community that speeding is an undesirable characteristic of the corridor, something that they would like to see addressed with more traffic calming features. And with that speed differential that you mentioned, certainly having a protected facility for bicyclists will be a focus of the alternatives that we develop. So not just a striped bike lane, but something that would provide more vertical barrier separation from higher speed vehicles. And the posted speed limit, I believe, on this segment is 35, but we certainly know that folks are driving way faster than that.
Yeah. If I remember right, it's also the intersections that are key to it. It's the speed, not only the absolute speed, but the speed at the intersections, peaking right turns and stuff. So some treatment of how all those, because you're adding a lot more intersections at speed, right? So if you look, there may be on the order of 20 intersections, 10 on each side, that will be at speed, at 50 miles an hour rather than 20 miles an hour.
Mhm.
So is there some thoughts about how to handle those intersections from a Vision Zero perspective?
So we haven't gotten as far as developing concepts yet, but that's great feedback, a comment I'll take back to the team. I'll make sure the concepts we develop address those areas of concern at the intersection.
Cool, thanks. I appreciate the response.
Mhm.
I have a
Yes, Commissioner.
question.
Cipriani.
I hear that the some of the feedback, the residents expressed a desire for more continuous sidewalks along that length. And I wonder if part of the thinking has considered whether the need for sidewalks and the need for protected bike lanes that are really protected. Like, is there a way to use the space to create a multi-use kind of path that would allow for both of them to be significantly separated from cars?
Yeah, certainly that concept has been explored before through the town's, I believe it's their circulation element. Prior studies have looked at a class 1 multi-use trail. So that's something we would definitely consider as we try to develop a logical range of concepts for the next phase.
Just as a thing to go with what Commissioner Altman brought up, I've really come to sort of look at bike lanes as like, it's infrastructure that belongs with pedestrians, right? Like ideally. And so like thinking about ways that we can just start to rethink where we're placing the non-car traffic. Anyway.
Mhm. Thank you. Does any other commissioners have any questions or comments? I wanted to thank you for the presentation. I thought it was excellent. And I also thought the work seemed really thorough and especially the public outreach. That was really interesting to me to see all the things that were accomplished. The reason I was asking a little bit about businesses, I think I remember this correctly when I was reading the article about the Palo Alto City Council meeting regarding removing parking on El Camino. It seemed that most of the objections came from either council members or local businesses that said the parking was essential to their business. And so I thought it was great that you reached out to them and, you know, maybe had a chance to get their perspective, obviously, but also see if parking was as critical to those businesses or if there were other means of parking around those commercial areas. Seems like that's an important part of that conversation. Anyway, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you for coming.
I think she has one more concluding slide, just to-
Fantastic.
for the next steps.
Oh, next steps.
Yeah,
Okay, bring it
just,
on.
quick next steps. So we'll be continuing to do a deeper dive into our technical analyses, looking at additional data to better understand travel patterns and travel markets that will inform the development of the concepts in our next phase. So we'll be back out in the community, hopefully in the fall or winter, to share those alternatives and then seek your feedback on a preferred concept.
Perhaps you can come back and share at a different stage. That's great. Also, I commend you for how quickly you went from existing conditions to evaluate concepts. That's pretty impressive. Anyway, great job.
Thank you.
Thanks again. All right. It looks like we are moving on to E3. Correct, Bradley? Yes.
Just a general comment. I thought it
Yes,
was
please.
really cool that this intercity,
Yes,
I thought.
yes, more of that.
As a practice, I want to really thank you guys for sharing. I learned a lot, but also, you know, just the two
Great.
cities working together, I thought was really cool.
I think that's an excellent point. And Christiane, thank you for, you know, on behalf of Menlo Park, intersecting with them, Kevin, for putting this on the agenda. I do think anything we can learn in terms of best practices, you know, just makes us all stronger. So thank you. It's a great point. Thank you, Kevin.
Through the chair, we should probably open it up for public comments.
Oh,
because
do we?
I
Yes,
do see
okay.
a
Thank
virtually
you very
raised
much.
hand. Yeah.
Matthew, where's your Matthew? Can you please ask for public comment on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment, you may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or a cell phone, press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you are participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. I see one virtually raised hand from, oh, I see two. We'll start with Adina. You should be able to speak now.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening, commissioners. Adina Levin, I am a Menlo Park resident, and I do use El Camino Real, sometimes walking or biking or taking the bus, and certainly resonate with all of the issues that were raised up. With regard to the comment and concern about speed and driving 50 miles an hour, the data is showing us that that's something that residents are concerned about. So design treatments on the street that help drivers go at a more appropriate speed that is, you know, already hazardous for pedestrians, and that would be less hazardous for pedestrians and cyclists would be a good idea. In terms of the bike lanes in various different other cities, Palo Alto is, I believe, going ahead with the bike lanes, and those are going to be contiguous with Los Altos and Mountain View in a repaving project. And Menlo Park, after doing a study following up to the downtown plan about a decade ago now, made a decision after recommending buffered bike lanes, which, by the way, was before a lot of the advances in protected bike lanes, but that was the recommendation. But then City Council said, well, let's wait for what our neighbors are doing to the right and to the left. And so now Palo Alto is moving with bike lanes, and hopefully Atherton will do so as well. Also with regard to bike lanes and who's bicycling, when I'm on El Camino Real and I often see people who appear as though they may be working in service jobs. In Menlo Park's a survey that was done for downtown before the pandemic actually showed quite a number of people who are commuting to Menlo Park from places like North Fair Oaks and Redwood City. And bicycling would be if it were made safer. First of all, people do bicycle already, and it's not that safe. So making that safer would help people commuting. And more people are now starting to use e-bikes, and there's great e-bike discount programs. So that's more ways to get cars off the road. With regard to car parking, I would urge, if it hasn't been done already, to not only ask businesses, would you like it for customers to be able to park in front of the business, but to actually visually observe, is there actually enough car parking in the parking spaces available for the business, and possibly around to the side, to make sure, like, there may be solutions even if there is parking removed. And last question is Samtrans, in the interest of bus reliability, looking at transit priority treatments for El Camino Real going through Atherton. Thank you.
Thank you, Adina. The next speaker is Katie.
Hi, it's another former Complete Streets Commissioner, Katie Baruzzi.
Hey.
And Adina just said amazingly a lot of the things that I was going to say, but I want to particularly echo a couple of thoughts. One is that I know some of you have been reading the great work by the guy who wrote Strong Towns website, but El Camino is kind of a strode. It meets neither the characteristics of an expressway nor a safe local road that fosters connectivity between businesses and homes. And I think unless we are somehow able to grade separate El Camino and really make it more of an expressway and eliminate all of these crossings at the grade level and intersections, which seems like an incredibly expensive thing to do that would be also kind of retrograde, then I think we probably need to lean pretty hard in the other direction, especially as we're seeing more and more homes and businesses clustered along El Camino. I actually used to commute on El Camino Real sometimes between my home in Menlo Park and San Mateo. And I used that route not because it was safe or comfortable, but because it was the most fast and direct way to go. I also found out to my horror that my then 13-year-old, maybe 14-year-old, I don't know, before high school kid was using El Camino to get from Menlo Park to Target with his friends. I think a lot of people use bikes because those are their best options for getting places. Certainly, as Adina mentioned, I see all kinds of people riding on El Camino who look like they're commuting to and from work. And I just think that for far too long, we've kicked around these ideas of maybe there's a parallel route, or maybe there's something we could have cyclists do that it'll take 15 minutes longer, but they're probably just doing this for fun. They don't need to get anywhere fast. So yeah, let's create a weird warren of side streets instead of making the one street that gets people where they want to go fast, making that safe. So I'm really encouraged by this study, and I'm encouraged by the fact that Palo Alto and other cities up and down the peninsula are starting to work on fixing El Camino and making it more of a ped and bike friendly street, which also ends up being friendly for everybody, businesses, residents, etc. So thank you so much. Keep up the good work, and looking forward to seeing where this goes.
Thank you very much for your comments. I did want to highlight, if someone didn't hear it, that both those speakers were former commissioners on our commission, and I really deeply appreciate their continued engagement in our meetings and our issues with great ideas and feedback. All right, then. Well, Matthew, are we done with public comment?
Yes, I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Okay. Of course. All right, then, Kevin, I don't think there's a need for a motion, correct? Because it says call for motion, but I don't think.
No, yeah. So if the commission are satisfied with the feedback that you have provided so far, happy to conclude the item and move on to the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. All right. Thanks again. We'll move on to item E3. Review the University of California, Berkeley's Safe Transportation Research and Education Center's safety assessments of Santa Cruz Avenue and Sand Hill Road. Matthew, playing a dual road tonight, our assistant engineer, will introduce this item.
Thank you, Chair. Let me share my slides. Are you able to see the slides? Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you again, Chair. My name is Matthew Hui. I'm the Assistant Engineer and also the Vision Zero Coordinator for the City of Menlo Park. Today, I want to provide a project update and also solicit your feedback for the Menlo Park Complete Streets Safety Assessment Project on Santa Cruz Avenue and Sand Hill Road. This is a corridor planning project that is a part of the city's Vision Zero efforts in collaboration with UC Berkeley SafeTrack, which is a research center, and also with key stakeholders in the city. So just to provide a brief agenda, I will be going through, the project is right now in the draft report stage, so I will be going through the background and process that led to the draft report. I'll also touch on a grant opportunity that is related to the project that the city is actively pursuing. I'll then dive deeper into the suggestions that is in that report, and then I'll go through the next steps. So just to provide a bit of a background, back in January 2024, the city adopted our Vision Zero action plan. The plan reaffirms the city's goals to eliminate fatalities and severe injuries by 2040. It also calls for a proactive, data-driven, safe systems approach to holistically reduce traffic risk citywide. That same time, the city identified and applied for a complete street safety assessment from UC Berkeley SafeTrack. So UC Berkeley SafeTrack is a state-of-the-art research center in traffic safety and also provides technical support services for local cities. So the Complete Street Safety Assessment is a program that local cities can apply to. We share with SafeTrack kind of our focus areas, what we're interested in. SafeTrack will then send a traffic safety expert to conduct a field visit, providing observations and also recommendations for the focus area. The city is one of the 16 communities across California to receive this safety assessment by SafeTrack in 2024. So these are the two corridors that the city has selected to focus on. One is Santa Cruz Avenue between Orange Avenue, that is the all-way stop to the west, and University Avenue, that is the signal location to the east. And then the second corridor that the city has selected is Sand Hill Road, with Sharon Park Drive to the west and Oak Avenue to the east. And we also included the intersection of Santa Cruz Avenue and Junipero Serra as well. And the rationale for the city's selection of these corridors are based on our Vision Zero action plan. Both of these corridors are on the city's high collision corridor network, and these are the 20% of city streets accounting for 90% of fatal and severe injuries in the city of Menlo Park. We chose these locations. We chose these two corridors because there are a lot of high priority intersections and high priority focus areas that are in these corridors, and that are explicitly identified in the Vision Zero action plan. For Santa Cruz Avenue, we focus on school children, biking and walking to Hillview School. There are challenges with them competing for space with vehicles that tend to be speeding. There are also challenges for them crossing or navigating intersections, especially side street stop controlled intersections, which is a high priority for the city. For Sand Hill Road, the focus is on accommodating both commuter and recreational cyclists that are commuting from Menlo Park to Stanford, crossing intersections that are currently very wide and not really designed for them. And then also for bicyclists that that bike to the hills on Sand Hill Road. And both these corridors have significant speeding challenges, and that is a key focus area for the city as well. So I'm going to go through sort of the processes that led to the draft report that we have right now. The city is very grateful for the opportunity to work together, to bring together a group of key community stakeholders to go through this assessment process with SafeTrack together. And so that includes staff from the police department, Hillview Middle School, Stanford University, a number of Safe Route to School champions, and a number of Complete Streets commissioners, including some here tonight. We started with a kickoff meeting in March where city staff and community stakeholders relayed our known safety concerns and what we know about these corridors to the SafeTrack team. The SafeTrek safety expert then came over to visit the community, which is the field visit and field assessment in April. The SafeTrek expert Joy came over to meet with city staff and also community stakeholders, and we walked the entire corridor for both Santa Cruz Avenue and Sand Hill Road. We specifically observed both the morning drop-off period and also the afternoon pickup period for Hillview Middle. And a lot of the valuable observations were derived from these observations. We also had a virtual debrief session, and this is a session where SafeTrek staff relayed sort of their observations and their initial suggestions to city staff and also to the community stakeholders to solicit our thoughts and feedback. And all this process led to
Oh,
the Menlo. Yes.
I'm so sorry. Can you back up that slide? When you were talking about the field assessment,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you mentioned that there were Menlo Park Police that came along.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so the field, all the community stakeholders that I mentioned previously were a part of the field assessment. And so we had participants from the police department, Hillview Middle School, Stanford Universities, and also Safe Route to School champions and Complete Streets commissioners.
Yeah, I thought
they're
the
all
staff, I thought that you and the staff, city staff did a great job of bringing all the stakeholders together.
Thank you. Yeah, it was a great visit, and we learned a lot, which is very valuable. Just to continue, right now we have received from SafeTrek a Menlo Park safety assessment draft report, and this is the draft report that's available as an attachment in the staff report. And it's a culmination of the field observations and the conversations that city staff, community stakeholders, and SafeTrek has been having. It has a couple of components. I'm going to just describe them very briefly here. It starts off with background information and crash history. The SafeTrek report does use a little bit more updated data than our Vision Zero action plan. And so they've done the data analysis and provided some valuable information there that I think have results aligning with some of the key findings in the Vision Zero action plan, such as identifying children under 15 as a high priority, bicycling as a high priority, and speeding as another high priority as well. The second part of the draft report is a benchmarking analysis. And so this is SafeTrek staff looking at institutional best practices in the safe systems approach and recommending those best practices to the city. One thing to note is that the adopted Vision Zero action plan back in January also had a benchmarking analysis done as well. So we think that the benchmarking in this report would be complementary to the benchmarking that was done previously. And third, I think this is the part that a lot of the community stakeholders are interested in, is the corridor-specific observations and suggestions from SafeTrek. And so before I dive into some of the corridor-specific observations and suggestions, I want to cover what city staff is doing and where we're heading next first, because the city is undergoing two parallel processes for this project. So to the left, we have sort of a timeline for the draft report. We've received the draft report from SafeTrek. Right now, the city is preparing our city comments. We're also asking participants who have participated in the process for their feedback. We'll be sending these feedback and comments to SafeTrek, and they'll be providing us with a final report in September. Concurrent to that process is a county pedestrian and bicyclist grant that the city is actively pursuing with a tight deadline of August 30th. And this grant is administered by the San Mateo, by SMCTA, the San Mateo County Transportation Authority, specifically for projects that improve bicyclist and pedestrian safety, connectivity, and comfort. And we think that this project and the suggestions from this project is a great fit and can be we can create a competitive grant application out of it. So that's why in evaluating the observations and suggestions in the SafeTrek report, staff is thinking about these individual suggestions and trying to identify whether or not they are relatively implementable, or whether or not they are items that require further discussion, further analysis, or further engagement. And staff is also trying to assemble a grant application package from this list of suggestions by SafeTrack that based on multiple factors of considerations, including whether or not these are high priority locations addressing high priority safety concerns, whether or not they align with the Vision Zero action plan, whether or not they are ready for implementation, and whether it fits in with our overall grant strategy.
Matthew, I've got a question about that.
Yeah,
Thank you. If you could back up.
no problem.
So would the grant cover both implementable and, items, and then the second type of items, which were, need more, research or feedback gathered about them?
Yeah, thank you for the question. The grant would be covering the implementable items, and staff is still working on identifying sort of what that appropriate and competitive bucket of projects is.
Okay. And then August 27th, that's City Council.
That's correct. Yeah, as part of the grant application, we will be requiring a City Council resolution, and we intend to seek that on August 27th, just ahead of the deadline.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So let's dive into the observations and suggestions for these two specific corridors. I'll start with Sand Hill Road. This is a map of Sand Hill Road with the 4 signalized intersections that are the key focus of this project. As you know, Sand Hill Road is a high capacity, high speed arterial corridor that provides sort of this connection for regional traffic to reach I-80 to the west. And so we see a lot of traffic there. But the corridor also serves bicyclists, both commuter bicyclists and recreational bicyclists. For commuter bicyclists, these are bicyclists that need to navigate these signalized intersections to get from Menlo Park or other communities in San Mateo to Stanford University. And so these are sort of challenging intersections for them to cross and navigate safely. And then for recreational bicyclists, they tend to travel along the roadway on Sand Hill Road to reach the hills to the west. And I also learned from Stanford University that this is a training route for the Stanford cycling team as well. And so this route serves a lot of vehicles, but then also has key bicyclist functions as well. And so in terms of thinking about what are the things that we can do to improve bicyclist safety and pedestrian safety at these intersections, the draft report included a list of suggestions that we think aligns with the city's vision of implementing low-cost systemic countermeasures system-wide. And so low-cost systemic countermeasure is really the industry speak for items for improvements that are proven to be successful and proven to improve safety, and that has been implemented throughout the country, and that are relatively low cost. And that means we have a lot more leeway and budget to implement them system-wide across our network to try to reduce that risk as much as we can everywhere. And so these are the elements that we think that is in the report that aligns with sort of our mindset of low-cost systemic countermeasures that we seek to apply whenever and wherever we can. And these are elements that we want to include in our grant application package. The draft report also included more major suggestions, more major infrastructure suggestions, and I've highlighted a couple of them here that we are considering as part of our grant application. And these are really addressing targeted needs for pedestrians and bicyclists at these two intersections. So to the left, you have the intersection of Sand Hill Road and Sharon Park Drive. During the site visit, our team observed bicyclists trying to make a left from Sharon Park Drive onto Sand Hill Road. And we think that these are commuter bicyclists that are trying to get potentially from the apartments, from the many apartments in that area to Stanford University. And so there's a need for commuter bicycling at that location. That said, currently that intersection is relatively car-centric and does not have a lot of bicyclist facilities. And so the suggestion by SafeTrek is to provide sort of targeted improvements that will improve that intersection experience for bicyclists. And this includes adding bollards to existing bike buffers to create better separation between the speeding cars and the bicyclists, using bike boxes in front of placing them in front of the at the front of the intersection to give bicyclists more space, and then also leveraging the available space on that one block of Sharon Park Drive and implementing a bike lane on that stretch of Sharon Park Drive as well.
Matthew, can I ask a question about that? Because
Yep.
when I was at that intersection, I was really not focusing on that bike lane Sharon Park Drive issue. So I was a little confused by that. Is there a bike lane on Sharon Park Drive, period, like going in that direction? Or is that just sort of providing a segment of a bike lane where none exists? Is it filling a gap? What is the purpose of that?
Yeah, so there are currently no bike lanes on Sharon Park Drive. And so this suggestion and potential project would be filling that gap.
But just in that one block?
But only in that one block, because we think that this would sort of this would be complementary to the intersection improvements.
Yeah.
And then sort of and then extensions of that bike lane would be future projects.
But, understood. Sorry,
Yeah.
Athena.
If I used to do this commute
Yeah.
all the time. I think that one block is really exacerbated. Traffic is exacerbated by the shopping center, which is right there.
Right, yeah.
And so.
And you mentioned the apartments too.
yeah.
Traffic coming from the apartments,
Yeah, so
commuters.
I do think that one block bike lane would help. Obviously, it would be better to extend it, but it is.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. And it's always good to get the eyes and ears of people who actually bike here. I guess I was just curious, Matthew, because I think you mentioned people coming out Sharon Park Drive here, maybe from the apartments and then making a left onto Sand Hill. So why wouldn't you put a bike lane on this other side of Sharon Park Drive in this block too?
Yeah, my apologies. This would be a graphical misrepresentation. We are proposing bike lanes on both sides of the street.
That helps a
for
little.
this block.
Sorry, I was a little not quite getting it. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and currently sort of we are still in the early phases, so we're still working on trying to determine what that bike lane would look like.
Sure.
And I think those are more detailed processes down the line.
Commissioner
Hey,
Altman?
Matthew, I've got a high level question. On this slide, it says these are for grant consideration. And on the previous side, I think those were things that could be done cheaply or more cheaply. Am I reading that right? On slide 9, those were
Yes.
low-cost systematic countermeasures. By low cost, is that something we need a grant for? Or because like bollards are low cost on 9, and on this one it says for grant consideration.
Mhm.
You see what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think I see what you're asking. Yeah, so in terms of grant application, the city is interested in applying for both these low-cost systemic countermeasures and also these more major improvements. But these low-cost systemic countermeasures align with a lot of the existing work that we're doing in terms of implementing Vision Zero citywide. And so these are the type of improvements that the city is also already planning to implement across the city.
Okay, so then on slide 10, are those dependent on a grant, or is it something that we can do?
So that would be dependent. So there are potentially two outcomes. If the city is able to secure grant funding, then of course we will be implementing them based on that schedule. But if the city is unable to secure grant funding, then these would become suggestions, or this would be a part of that citywide Vision Zero implementation process.
Thanks.
No problem.
If I may add to the point about selecting grant or going for the grant funding, even with low-cost items, it'll really help us out in the future as well. Securing that funding, which essentially allow us to conserve our existing funding for future projects. So it's always nice to get those extra money, even if it's a low-cost item.
Got it.
Yeah.
I fully appreciate that.
Yeah.
Just a mechanical question. These items, are they go on a list someplace, on master lists, or, you know, you've reconciled them against Vision Zero, which had some to-do things, and there's a TMP. So of these suggestions, whether they get granted or not granted, do they go into a single list so we can, you know, see them all together in one place, or what happens to the suggestions and observations from a mechanical point of view going forward?
Yeah, I can answer that. So these, all of these suggestions will be in the final report by SafeTrek. And then we will also be including them as part of our Vision Zero implementation. That is not to say that that will sort of move a lot of these suggestions into a broader, larger citywide process that includes its own prioritization process, but it will live in those two places.
Thanks.
Matthew, perhaps you're going to get to this, but I know in your report at this Sharon Park Drive, Sand Hill intersection, there's also mention of bicycle video detection. Are you going to get to the other things that are listed on that table, or should we, or are you doing, like, not covering every single recommendation on the slides?
Yeah, so the slides are sort of select recommendations that we think are either major or that are important. There are other suggestions, and there are a number of other suggestions in the report as well that we might be holding off of, or that we're still looking into.
Okay, so maybe in the time when we're providing feedback, if someone thinks one of those things is important, they can mention it. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, I have one more question about this so I know that along the golf course here on the Stanford, probably on Stanford property, they have that fully separated bidirectional bike lane, which goes up the hill. Is there, I don't know if that would be a low cost suggestion, but is there any way to integrate that into the plans for the bike lanes on the west side of Santa Cruz Avenue going up to Sharon Park Drive? So just continue that somehow. Since I know that kind of, if you're going up the hill and you're on the separated bike lane, you do have to cross Santa Cruz and then Sand Hill to be able to continue on the north side, or continuing, I guess, west on.
Gotcha. Yeah. So in response to sort of that connection between the shared use path on the golf course and that connection to Sand Hill, there are two elements. There are two intersections that I think can potentially serve that function. One is the intersection that you've mentioned, Sand Hill and Santa Cruz. I believe the county currently has a project for some improvements at that intersections underway. There are also some suggestions from the SafeTrek report, such as calling for a study to look into potentially turning that into a complete intersection. So that intersection is something that we're looking at as well. And then there's also another potential crossing point for those bikes, which is at the intersection of Sand Hill and Oak. And as you can see here, there are a couple of elements that we are considering for the grant application that directly addresses the challenges of bicyclists crossing Sand Hill Road. And so maybe this would be a good opportunity for me to dive into those recommendations here. And so the improvements at Sand Hill and Oak really targets the challenges that bicyclists are facing crossing Sand Hill Road at this particular intersection. We think this intersection is a high priority in the city's active, or the region's active transportation network, because it is one of the few points where bicyclists can cross Sand Hill and get into Stanford University. But right now, there is limited, there is a bit of a challenging path for bicyclists to make that crossing, requiring them to dismount and cross at the crosswalk. And so we're looking at a couple of potential improvements with the goal of improving that crossing, which would also improve the crossing experience for those that are trying to get onto Sand Hill Road as well. And just to dive a little deeper into that, one idea that we are in the early stages of looking into is potentially installing some form of a bike signal for bicyclists that are coming off of the shared use path on the golf course, so that they will be able to more comfortably either get onto Oak Avenue, which is our neighborhood bike boulevard, or access Sand Hill Road. I want to cover some of the other Sand Hill Road suggestions. These are some of the other major suggestions in the report. We are considering not including them into our grant application, in part because we think these are suggestions that would require more discussion, more analysis, and more community engagement. And that would include the protected intersection study at Santa Cruz Sandhill, and potentially a two-way cycle track along, this would be Junipero Serra, and then also a two-stage bike turning facility at Santa Cruz and Junipero Serra. We think these are bigger ideas that will require further study and would also require coordination with county as well to make sure we're creating a seamless network and we're not just improving one small chunk of the roadway.
Matthew, what's meant by protected intersection?
Yeah, so protected intersection is a concept where we're tightening the intersection so that bicyclists are able to more comfortably navigate and cross the intersection next to crosswalks. It provides a much safer crossing experience for bicyclists. And so we currently, for example, a lot of these intersections, for bicyclists trying to go through, we require them to intersect with cars that are trying to turn right. And so there's a conflict point in front of the intersection. With a protected intersection design, we would take that conflict point away and bring it to the intersection.
Okay. Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions for Sand Hill Road before I move on to Santa Cruz Avenue? Okay, so this is the second corridor that the city worked on, that the study worked on, and this is Santa Cruz Avenue with Santa Cruz Avenue and Orange Avenue, which is the always stop to the left, and then Santa Cruz Avenue and University Drive, which is the signalized location to the right. There is one more signal locations in the middle, which is Santa Cruz Avenue and Elder Street, and then there are a lot of uncontrolled side street stop controlled intersections along this corridor in between these couple of intersections. I want to highlight these side street stop controlled intersections because during our field visit, we find that they can be quite challenging and potentially has a lot of safety risk for bicyclists and also vehicles. So as you can see in the image in the middle, Santa Cruz Avenue is heavily used by pedestrians and bicyclists going to and from Hillview Middle School. This is one of the key arterial routes going east-west in the middle of our city. And navigating these side street stop controlled intersection where vehicles don't have to stop along Santa Cruz Avenue, but have to stop on the side streets can be difficult for a couple of reasons. One, it is difficult for pedestrians to cross because Santa Cruz is not controlled. Second, it is challenging for bikes to make turns at these intersections because you're facing oncoming traffic at speed. And third, as you can see in this image here, you often see vehicles encroaching onto crosswalk or onto the bike lane to get a better visibility, to try to make a challenging turn when vehicles aren't stopping. And so these are some of the safety challenges that we see at a lot of these side street stop controlled intersections throughout the entire corridor. I also want to point out the image to the lower left here. This is an observation that we made for the PM during the PM hours when school was let out. We noticed a very, very significant amount of school children, both walking and biking, exiting Hillview Middle School around the intersection of Santa Cruz and Olive Street there, and heading either towards Olive Street or east towards Santa Cruz Avenue. Our data indicates that in a 15-minute period, there are over 300 bicyclists and pedestrians making that crossing. This creates a really huge wave of bicyclists, which is great to see, but they also can't fit onto a 5-foot bike lane. And so they use both the vehicles lanes and the bike lanes as well. and create a potential physical hazard with vehicles that are traveling on Santa Cruz Avenue. And some of the suggestions later on targets that specific behavior. Again, we start off with some of the low-cost systemic countermeasures that we want to include in the grant that is a part of the city's Vision Zero implementation efforts. On the top left, you see a couple of signalized improvements for signal locations. And then we also have sort of improvements for uncontrolled crossings, such as having a concrete or plastic median islands. And then lastly, we also have a radar speed feedback sign, which is a low-cost systemic countermeasure focusing on reducing vehicle speeds and managing them. So this is targeting a lot of the challenges for pedestrians crossing, for bicyclists using the road, along with speeding vehicles on the corridor as well. There are two major suggestions from the SafeTrek draft report that we are taking into consideration as part of our grant application. To the right is a curb extension on the southwest corner and also a new crosswalk at the intersection of Santa Cruz and San Mateo Drive. So this is one of the side street stop controlled intersection that we're quite concerned about that I've mentioned previously. This intersection is an important one for our active transportation network because San Mateo Drive leads to the bike bridge that goes to Stanford University. And so bicyclists would be making turning movements at this intersection. And these are improvements to try to improve that experience for both bicyclists and pedestrians. To the left is a suggestion for a pedestrian hybrid beacon. This is known as PHB, or more commonly a hawk signal at the intersection of Santa Cruz and Olive. This suggestion explicitly targets that wave of school children leaving school that we saw earlier. And the difference, currently this intersection is a side street stop controlled intersection with a hawk signal. So if you press the cross button, there would be a yellow strobe that flashes, alerting drivers to your presence and encouraging them to stop. Pedestrian hybrid beacon is one step above that. If you press the button, you will get a walk signal, and vehicles would actually get these red balls that are much more effective at getting them to stop. And the reason why we think this can be effective at treating this particular location is because with the wave of kids coming out of school, by stopping the vehicles and allowing that wave to proceed along Santa Cruz Avenue, we're creating a temporal separation between the vehicles and the kids biking. And we think this would really be a useful targeted improvement for this corridor and also for this intersection. And understanding that hog signal is a proven safety countermeasure by the Federal Highway Administration, is used across the country, but would be new to this community. There would be more engagement process for this particular improvement. And I think this graphic points out sort of that procedure of how a hawk signal or pedestrian hybrid beacon works. The signal would be dark when no pedestrians or bicyclists press on the button or are using it, and it is only activated when there is pedestrian or bicyclists, and the red light would be there to get drivers to stop, like an actual signal. There are a couple of other major suggestions from the draft report as well. We think these are items that may require further analysis, discussion, and engagement. So we lean not to include them as part of our grant application. These include adding a bike lane on Olive Street, which would entail potentially parking removal. The draft report also calls for a study of a two-way cycle track along Santa Cruz Avenue. This is one of the big ideas from the report. And then the draft report also proposes us to look into imposing left turn restrictions during the AM peak period at certain key intersections and driveways to address the conflict between turning vehicles and bicyclists. And so just to recap on the next steps, to the left, we have the report. We've received a draft report. Right now, we're soliciting feedback from participants. We're providing comments from the city, and we're also soliciting feedback from the Complete Streets Commission. We'll be getting these feedbacks and comments back to SafeTrek, and they'll be producing a final report in September. And parallel to the process, we're looking into, and staff is working hard to try to make the application deadline for the County Peck Bike project, which would provide valuable funding for us to implement some of these suggestions in the report. And just to wrap up in terms of the feedback requests, staff is seeking your feedback on elements that resonates the most with you, whether there are suggestions or problems that you think are high priority, whether there are things that staff hasn't considered, or there are things that you think staff should take into consideration. Any type of feedback is much appreciated as we proceed in the process. Thank you very much for listening, and look forward to your feedback.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Are there any clarifying questions from the commission before I take public comment?
I have one question about the, I know that this was not part of the grant application, but on Santa Cruz Avenue, the proposed two-way bikeway, how much of Santa Cruz Avenue is the proposal, like how many blocks would that proposed cycle track be for?
Yeah, so this is a generic recommendation for the city to look into that treatment across the entire Santa Cruz Avenue corridor. So if the city does decide to investigate this option, then it would likely entail the entire corridor.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? All right, then. Matthew, can you please call for public comments on this item?
Thank you. Let me go back to announcer mode real quick. For virtual attendees who wish to provide public comments, you may engage the raise hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. I see 4 raised hands online. The first speaker is Adina.
Hello, good evening, commissioners. I'm going to focus most for all of my comments on the Santa Cruz recommendations, as that is someplace that is very close to where I live, and that is streets that I use on a continual basis multiple times per day. So, and I do observe the middle schoolers, that pack of middle schoolers, going back and forth. And it is both joyous to see and also a safety concern. So glad that there's a lot of the attention here to the safety. I do support the various different crossing improvements being proposed, including the Hawk Beacon. I use the intersection where the Hawk is being proposed less often than the other push a button and get a light up by the church. But at the one up by the church, when you push and get the light, some fraction of drivers stop, but a lot of them don't. And so I think something that is stronger to protect the kids is a good idea. The item, I'm glad to see that the two-way cycle track is not being proposed to be moved forward at this time. I have some a big question and then some pretty serious concerns bordering on abject terror. The question is, would that actually propose to remove the bike lane on the other side of the street? And the grave concerns have to do with the fact that this is looking to solve a problem, an important issue of the students going back and forth on one side of the street to and from Hillview, but there also are plentiful people who use the other side of the street to do things like going to downtown, going to the train, coming in the downtown direction and then heading off to Lyle Park, heading to Stanford, many reasons to go in the other direction, as well as many reasons for people to be bicycling and then crossing the street to head to those other destinations. And so if you have a two-way cycle track on the Hillview side, and then you have people that are having to, cross over and turn, that creates quite a lot of opportunity for significant surprise to increase the risk of collisions and potentially a lot of increased danger because of those other travel patterns becoming more complicated and less safe. So I would really, I'm like not excited about that at all. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Kevin.
All right. Chair, Commissioner, staff, I'm Kevin Rennie from the Willows neighborhood. Thank you for this presentation and great advocacy. It's really wonderful to see Menlo Park supporting these initiatives. I know you're short on time for the deadline. Sounds like there's other current and future overlapping projects, but just wanted to always push to get outreach to the community across Menlo Park with surveys or other things with any type of these projects. I'm not sure if that was done or not, but I'm always interested in engaging further. Things that I would like to see, street cleaning for bike lanes if they're protected. A lot of times they're protected bike lanes, but then there's debris and garbage and stuff that makes it unrideable. And then a couple comments on the two sections. West side of Santa Cruz, I would like to see removing the sidewalk. It goes to nowhere, and having it the same level of the road and basically having a concrete barrier protecting the sidewalk that would go down and just create a gigantic bike lane and have it continue through all the way through Santa Cruz Avenue and then through Uniparis Air Alpine intersection, just to give a chance for bicyclists to continue in a T intersection. The east side of Santa Cruz Avenue, it'd be great to see a concrete barrier to protect bikes. Cars sit in the bike lane, they block bikes. And just as long as there's enough space for two bikes abreast to be able to move and pass each other. And then Santa Cruz, last year a kid got hit going to Hillview Middle School. I would like to see better understanding of the collecting roads that go into Hillview Middle School. And then my last bit here, Santa Cruz, I know it wouldn't happen for the whole course, but it'd be great to see basically sidewalks being the same level as the road and incorporating the bike lane and the sidewalk together and just having a gigantic bike path, walkway all integrated together with a cement barrier, preventing the kids crossing streets in the middle at not intersections or anything else. And then since Hillview, the peak is coming and going, it would be nice to actually see the police do something. I've called them multiple times, taking my kids to Lower Laurel. They always say they're going to show up and they never seem to. So thank you again. I yield back.
Thank you. The next speaker is Katie.
Hi, it's Katie Baruzzi again, and I'm very familiar with all of these segments, and I'm excited about some of the work that's happening. I want to second Adina's caution about two-way bike lanes. It just seems like a good application for streets where you don't have a lot of intersections. I do notice frequently that kids are choosing to ride on the wrong side of Santa Cruz, and but I consider that to be something that we probably need to train kids not to do and build roads in ways that that's not the obvious thing to do. I think that in the long run, like most places where they're going to want to bike, they're going to be expected to bike with traffic, and it's good to get people used to doing the things you want them to do for their whole lives. I used to also use that Oak Avenue Sandhill intersection every day. I would bike with my son to Oak Knoll, and then I would take that route to get to my job at Stanford. And I'm very excited to hear that you're going to be making that safer. I do want to comment, or I have actually would love to hear the commission talk a little bit more with staff about Olive. To me, I mean, we've just made Middle Avenue something closer to a complete street, still need sidewalks on both sides. And we have done this with Santa Cruz, and Olive is a connector that serves kids from elementary schools and middle schools around the area, as well as other people who are commuting different places. So I would hope that we can apply the same logic to Olive that we have done to other streets in our community where people tend to go fast and there are residences with driveways and garages. And I'd love to hear staff dig into that one a little bit more. Thanks so much.
Thank you. The next speaker is Randy.
Good evening. Thank you for the great presentation. So, always it's a little disappointing to see the west side funding instead of the east side with funding issues on the horizon, but it's not uncommon with the city. Just a couple notes. That Sandhill and Sharon Park Drive, there's also decently well-used Stanford bus stop there. So at times there's some good pedestrian crossing as well. Keep that in mind. The Hawk signal, for that high volume 15-minute time frame, there's already a crossing guard. So it seems like it'd be more for the lower volume times when there's no crossing guard. And I wonder if it might be better to spread those resources down the whole street instead of maybe investing in the shiny thing. Maybe a better payoff that way. And then finally, I believe there was perhaps some past issues with Santa Cruz adjustments that required a lot of rework. Were any of those learnings addressed in the study or even considered? But yeah, thank you for the presentation. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no more virtually raised hands, I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Well, at this point, I'd like to ask the commissioners for feedback, and I'm wondering what might be the most organized and efficient way to proceed. One idea might be, Matthew, that you put up the visual of the map for the Sandhill area. I think it's always good to have a bit of a grounding, and if people have feedback on that area, we can do that first. And then after everyone comments who wants to comment, we can move on to the map of Santa Cruz. Does that make sense? Okay, let's do it that way. Whoa. There we go. So yeah, thank you for scrolling back. Okay, so do any commissioners have feedback on the discussion and some of the proposed? Oh, no, I didn't mean this one. Sorry, I meant this one. Thank you. Feedback on some of the proposals here, anything that was not proposed, anything that is proposed. Let's get it all on the table. You want to kick off?
I'm short for this part. I have more for other things.
Oh, okay. Does anyone have anything here? I have a couple things. Matthew, my comments here are starting from right to left for a moment, but Matthew Raskoff, who's a commissioner, but not present at this meeting, I thought was very helpful in the discussion around this intersection. And having witnessed so many people making that turn from Oak Avenue onto Sandhill turning right, I absolutely 100% think a no turn on red there would be very, very helpful. There was just a lot of kind of very sloppy going into the area where biker would be and just not really even paying much attention. That was a pretty, I thought, bad intersection there. So I support that very much. And also the new bike signal there, I would support very much. I would, I know we're under a really tight time frame for submitting a grant, but I just wonder generally if there's a lot of the things are in the column of need additional analysis or public engagement, I might have put into ready to finalize. So as much as we can get into that grant that we think we can, I would, if we think it's very justified. Okay, the other thing here was speed. So when we started the presentation, made the comment that one of the big concerns on both this part of Santa Cruz, and then the part of Santa Cruz that is on the other slide is speed. But am I missing something? I don't see speed control in this select group of, things you have here for grant consideration.
Yeah, that's a good observation. A lot of the focus of the more major suggestions are on physical separation for bicyclists.
Okay.
And there are some elements of speed management that would be under the low-cost systemic countermeasure. So I would point out sort of the radar speed feedback sign would be one of the metrics countermeasure that we're using to manage speeds. Given that this is a bike ped project, and given that we're trying to pursue a bike ped grant, speed is one component that we're trying to manage, but we are also focusing on the separation of space and time between the speeding vehicles and the bicyclists and pedestrians. And a lot of these major suggestions target those.
So I would like to make a comment, maybe from the benefit of having been on the commission for 3.5 years and gone through every meeting on Middle Avenue. But the first thing I learned about Middle Avenue is how many comments the city had gotten about the speed on Middle Avenue for years and years and years. And I wish that when the city council had immediately approved speed bump and what's it called, radar flashing speed limit signs on Middle, that we had at that moment said these should be installed right away. Instead, they're being installed as a package. I understand that next summer of 2025. But this, I live on Santa Cruz. I've lived there for 12 years. I know that thing like the back of my hand, and speed is a real problem. So as much as I understand that in this, the grant you're applying for, you want to focus on the separation of bike and ped, I'm going to keep my eagle eye on this because I don't want to see, measures that are addressing the speed issue deferred. I think
Yeah,
that's.
I think as staff, we absolutely agree with that, and we do see very significant speeding issues and challenges on Sand Hill Road, especially because it's connecting to interstate, so there's some speed spillover, and then it's also downhill for vehicles going eastbound, and so speeding is absolutely a challenge there. I think that is something that the Vision Zero implementation plan is focusing on. Just for reference, the city will be is considering resurfacing options potentially for this. For other segments of Sand Hill Road. And so when the opportunity arises, we do consider speed management techniques such as reducing the width of the lanes and other types of measures that we can take to reduce vehicle speeds. So point well taken.
Thank you. That was a really excellent answer. I appreciate the detail. And I just really support the city staff in keeping the pressure on taking action on that issue. Thank you. The other comment I had on the Sand Hill Road, Sharon Park Drive intersection was in the table on page E3.3. It says yield to pedestrian sign on southbound Sharon Park Drive. Can you let us know where that sign is proposed to be located? Because one of the first things I got, feedback I got from people early on when I was on the commission was around, I think, what the place you're addressing on the yield to pedestrian side. So where would that be?
Yeah, so the yield to pedestrian sign is intended to increase driver awareness of the conflict between cars turning left from Sharon Park Drive onto Sand Hill and pedestrians that are trying to cross that crosswalk on the east side of Sand Hill. And so that yield to pedestrian sign would likely be somewhere to the left on the southeast corner of that intersection, where the turning vehicles will be able to see that sign and increase their awareness there.
Yes, that's what I thought. I think that's an excellent idea. I might not have been, plucked to be put onto this particular slide, but I would encourage including that in the grant. I don't see that would be controversial, but I just wanted to say that I supported that. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Seaborn.
Just
I'm curious. I know that this came up in one of the lists, but is high visibility crosswalk like also a thing that can be added there?
It's excellent.
Like
Yeah.
part of it is, I know we have yield for pedestrian signs in lots of places where we're not yielding for pedestrians.
Yeah.
And so like, I worry that absent some other bright thing to say, hey, there's people here.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Thank you, Commissioner. Yes, so high visibility crosswalk is part of our low cost systemic countermeasures. So that is a treatment that we try to implement at every intersection when we can.
Oh, excellent.
Okay, I'm just quickly, so Sand Hill Road, Santa Cruz Ave, one of the things we talked about during the walk audit was around guided, oh, there we go, intersection guidelines. At that intersection in particular, because it's just this big, vast, sprawling intersection, and there's really no, it would be helpful, it seemed, and we're chatting with the consultant around, for both bikes and cars to have some guidelines there. I don't know if that's something that's on the table, but I felt strongly that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think in terms of intersection guidelines at the intersection of Sand Hill and Santa Cruz, that is definitely a low-cost countermeasure that we like to include into the grant and implement relatively quickly. I think that intersection requires us to coordinate further with the county of San Mateo because they own half of that intersection, and so that coordination is underway. And so those are improvements that we're definitely looking at. And then we are also looking at sort of broader improvements for that intersection to address turning the conflict between turning vehicles and turning bicyclists. Those would be sort of longer term suggestions.
Okay, well, I'm ready to go to the slide that shows Santa Cruz between the Orange and University. Yep. Okay, do any commissioners have feedback on this section?
All right, I'm happy to go first. I may loop back because sometimes I don't put them all in one place. But so just actually, as I'm looking, one of the main questions I had about the pedestrian hybrid beacon, because in my thoughts about that section, I think at least somebody brought it up to me, like why we couldn't just close the road for 10 minutes, like for 5 minutes, just to get like those 300 bikes across the road, right? I feel like the same way at MA, it's immediate. And so I guess my question is, how long can that hawk signal stay on? I have a couple just about that hawk question. So one of them is how long is it allowed to be on for the traffic to be stopped? Can we hold side traffic at the same time somehow so that it's not just along Santa Cruz? And also, while Menlo Park may not have one, I'm pretty sure there's one on El Camino, kind of around Target, and maybe one on Alameda near the fire station. So it's not like we don't encounter them. And they're pretty obvious.
There's that one in Atherton where there was the fatality, the pedestrian fatality.
Right,
yes.
So they have, so that I think was one of my questions about the hawk signal. Really, I'm in favor of all the things that we can do along here. I am also I agree with the concerns about the two-way bike lane. Because also especially if you take the bike lane out from the other side of the road, I'm concerned that the end of school, there will be no room for counter commute bikers, right? If you make a two-way bike lane and then you send everybody down it, it's just going to be full of one-way bikers. And so it does seem like a complication for a short window of time. And so I guess I'm going to stop there for a minute because I have to collect my thoughts again, but somebody else can chime in.
Can I keep going with the two-way bike track? I have just had mixed feelings about two-way bike path or a multi-use path. the morning that we did the walk audit was a garbage can morning. And they did mention in the report that two-way bike path could help obviate that difficulty that the students do have because the garbage cans are in the bike lane. I think it's Wednesday mornings. They have to then exit the bike lane, use that left hand, shoulder look to ensure their own safety, go around that. And they have to do that multiple times as they go down Santa Cruz. So if we did have that multi-use bike path, it would kind of ease that difficulty. Additionally, even with all the education that we do in the schools, the kids don't ride single file. They're riding as a clump, which because they would be with, huge hordes of them moving one way at one time of day, a different way the other time of day, it would give them a lot more space to ride in a clump. And I think there's an importance to building something that the students of this age group will actually use. But also to that point, I would be very hesitant to remove the proper bike lane, I suppose I would call it, on the other side of the street. I don't know if there's space to have a multi-use or just a two-way bike path on one side while also retaining a more traditional bike path on the other side.
I think that wouldn't be possible unless you eliminated the middle turn lane, which came up when we were long time ago looking at whether to install sidewalks on Santa Cruz Avenue, and the city staff was really adamant that it would not be a good idea to remove the middle turn lane. It was because of the backup that would occur in Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Can I just add to, because I guess I just apply this to everything now. The interesting little bike sidewalk thing that is in Redwood City on Middlefield, there's only like between Woodside and like Main Street. Not Woodside. It's up a little bit from Woodside. It's like Costco, right? But a little bit up from Costco, there's a section of Middlefield where there's a sidewalk and a bike lane right next to each other. And then you get and there's a ton of little apartments along there. So there's lots of little driveways that you're crossing. But what I'm thinking of for this is because there's an edge of the sidewalk still where your trash cans would go that's kind of in the street, right? But it's not blocking the sidewalk pedestrian path because the sidewalk pedestrian path goes flat where, how the driveways like dip down, that there's still space for that. So it's like the sidewalk, the bike path, and then the little dip down driveway, and then that's where your garbage cans go. So I just wonder, like, as we're imagining this whole, like, not to beat a horse about it, but the like moving the bike lanes into the sidewalk area and putting actual like physical separation. I know Santa Cruz just went through getting sidewalks, so I feel like taking down the sidewalks and making them something different might not go over well. But just a thought about.
I have a kind of clarifying question related to all of this is how much width is there to work with in this space? Like, is there actually sort of leaving aside parking considerations and middle lanes? Like, how much is there to work with for this?
63 inches. How wide is it's like 63 feet or something? Do you know?
Yeah. I don't know off the top of my head. I do believe the width varies along this segment and is somewhere around 40 feet from curb to curb. But Kevin, do please correct me if you have better numbers.
But there are also sidewalks after that curb, right? Which existing sidewalks, which could be worked into this.
Yeah, there's no parking on Santa Cruz, and there are sidewalks, 5 foot sidewalks, 5 foot, I think, on both sides that were installed probably like, I don't know, 7 years ago, 6 years ago.
Yeah, you're probably looking at about 40 to 43 curb to curb distance.
Okay.
I can also provide a response to questions for the hawk signal or the pedestrian hybrid beacon. Concurring with the commissioner, the intent behind the signal is to sort of create a reasonable stop of traffic so that the bike wave can go ahead of the traffic. And one of the suggestions and one thing we talked about with the safety expert or the consultant is whether or not we can retime or we can time the hawk signal so that specifically when school is let out, that red signal lasts longer. And we think that is definitely something that is possible. We're not sure the extent to which we can do it. I think that is something that we will still have to conduct analysis and also conduct engagement on. But certainly holding traffic is an intended goal of the hawk signal. And then as for whether or not we can prevent or ask the side traffic on Olive to stop, that is something that we're looking at as well, potentially such as having no left turn sign that turns on whenever the hawk signal is turned on so that left turning vehicles aren't turning when pedestrians are crossing. Those are treatment options that we're looking into as well.
Thank you.
And then as for just to respond to the conversation on the two-way bike lane as well, we really appreciate the conversation and the comments from the public and the commission. Currently, these suggestions are phrased explicitly by SafeTrack staff as suggestions, and so they do not commit the city to any of these improvements, even though the city takes safety and takes this report very seriously. We definitely hear from community concerns and potential opportunities that has been identified as well for having that two-way bike lane. So these are comments that we will be relaying back to SafeTrack for their consideration, and also any type of further consideration of the two-way bike lane would entail a lot more analysis and engagement as well.
All right. Do any commissioners have additional feedback on some of the suggestions for Santa Cruz Avenue, this portion?
I have a general question.
Yes, Commissioner Hartman.
I think this has been really good. The thing that really stuck out of my mind was the OTS observation where Menlo Park rated extremely low, especially for 15 years old and younger in terms of safety.
I know.
So I fully acknowledge that statistics are tough, but it is a comparative analysis. So I'd be interested in your guys' comments on that number. For me, it creates a sense of urgency. So my follow-up question, almost independent of the comments, is, what can we do to accelerate this? Because there's really some really good findings here. It's a great study. What can we do to help accelerate it?
Thank you, Commissioner Altman. Yeah, that's a statistics that we take seriously. I believe Commissioner is referring to the Office of Traffic Safety Statistics, comparing the city of Menlo Park with 93 similarly sized cities and communities across California, and finding that we ranked the worst amongst these 93 cities in terms of the number of bicyclists under 15 killed or injured. Bicyclist safety, especially for youth, is something that the city is working on and taking very seriously, especially as part of the Vision Zero effort. It's a focus group, and the age and the mode bicyclists under 15 are something that is explicitly identified and something that the city is focusing on. We think that this statistics, to provide a nuance perspective, this statistics also reflects the fact that we are a bicyclist-friendly city, and a lot of our children bike around and bike to school. And that is reflective in the number of collision, because it's not a collision rate, but it's a raw number of collisions. And so the statistics does reflect that as well, but we do see this as a huge safety challenge, and we do share that sense of urgency. As for what we can do, we think our approach to apply for to pursue the grant, given the tight deadline, is one way that we're trying to accelerate a lot of the implementation of the suggestions from the report, trying to find a balance between implementing them as fast as possible, while making sure that we are identifying projects that we think are implementable, that we think are accepted by the community, and also seeking opportunities to conduct further engagement and further analysis down the line as well. That's something that we will be doing. The recommendations from this SafeTrek report, we think it would provide really valuable information for these two corridors, but also to similar corridors across the city. We select these two corridors strategically. One is constrained, denser, children, bicyclists, and speeding cars. The other one is a key regional arterial speeding vehicles, more commute bicyclists. We selected them strategically so that we can apply these lessons to other similar roads in our city as well. So these are definitely lessons that we're learning and that we are applying as we try to implement Vision Zero in a way that is leveraging that low-cost systemic approach to reduce risk as fast and as quickly and as comprehensively as we can.
That's great. Thanks.
Matthew, thank you. You're like preaching to the choir, but I will say that when I've been working on Vision Zero, the working group last year, that aspect of applying the learnings to create systemic solutions, I thought was really, really critical. So it's really impressive to me that you're thinking about that as you start out on getting funding for projects. How can we then, is this a project which we can then apply those solutions to a lot of places in Menlo Park? And I really appreciate that, because we want to make as much positive change as we can in as short as time as possible. I have a couple of comments on this section. If everyone else is done, I don't want to. Oh, no, go ahead, Commissioner Brickman, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I appreciate Commissioner Altman's point as far as moving really quickly. One of the hats I wear is Safe Routes to School at my children's school. And there's a tension between encouraging students and families to bike while knowing that there are still things that we need to do to improve their safety. So I really appreciate kind of that sense of urgency. Two things that stood out to me in the really excellent report that don't necessarily work into this grant, but maybe could, or are just helpful to say out loud and maybe be thinking about. One is education. And they bring up a formal education campaign about street safety, specifically targeting drivers, advertisements on buses, bus shelters, in-school curriculum, public service announcements, a range of other strategies. That's something I've really been thinking about. I think we do have a fairly robust bike education effort within the MPCSD public schools. I'm under the impression that the other schools and school districts within Menlo Park are also doing a good job. To some extent, we can get the parents that way, but we're not necessarily getting like the general driver with things like, be sure that you're giving the cyclist 3 feet of space. I think some drivers don't even understand what to do with the hawk signals, because it is that solid red and the flashing red. And at some of the spots that we've mentioned tonight, I have seen a lot of confusion when the hawk signals come on. So just like education around cycling and, a hawk signal and some of these other things. The other thing that stood out to me, having a public health background, and this was one of the very few things that the city of Menlo Park scored below average at, almost everything else was national average and or exceeding it. Was involving and coordinating with health agencies. I just wanted to mention, I think that would be a really interesting route to maybe look at, complex things and how we can, Chair Cole, you put it so well earlier, a standard around the entire city. So just kind of some things I wanted to mention that I really appreciated. in the report, not necessarily meant for the grant, but maybe some things for us as a commission and our city staff to be thinking about.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Excellent. Actually, Kevin, you and I were both talking about our experience at Hawk Signals, where I know Camino people kind of are stopping and looking at each other like, am I going? I don't think people do know how those work. So I totally agree. Well, just hitting some big things right off the bat. I want to share with the commissioners where I live on Santa Cruz, because you'll see that I have a sort of a bird's eye, well, like a great perch, right, to observe all this stuff. But where that blue arrow says curb extension and new crosswalk right there points to the corner, I live 2 houses left of that. So I'm right there watching it all the time. My son went to Hillview and et cetera, et cetera. So a couple things I just wanted to say on the two-way bike lane. I run up and down Santa Cruz, so I run on that side of the street, right? So this the lower side of the street is where I live, and I run down towards Santa Cruz and Orange. So if you picture me running on that sidewalk, and I will tell you that every single time I do that, all the people coming out on these side streets who are turning right toward me on Santa Cruz never even know I'm coming. You know, they just kind of look to the left and they're like, I'm going, you know? So I think my real fear about a street like this was so much traffic coming in from the side streets. And that behavior being, I mean, I don't think I see any other behavior on Santa Cruz and people making those turns. I think there's just much too high risk of people making a turn like that and going right into a kid on a bike coming toward them. And they thought they checked if anyone was coming to the left, and then they turned right. So I think that's, to me, I had read something when we were looking at Middle about two-way bike lanes that the Federal Highway Administration put out, and they were actually not recommended by this federal agency. So to me, I'm not a fan right now. Of course, I want to hear more, but it doesn't make sense. The other thing I think Meredith said, I'm not sure, but the other thing I worry about is just watching the behavior of the kids riding bikes, and it's such a social thing, and how they interact and how they move and groove with their bikes. I think it's really challenging to have a situation where there is a biker going against traffic between a bunch of kids and a bunch of cars. And I don't see that person having a lot of wiggle room should some of the bikers, and the others closer to the sidewalk, maybe get into their lane a little bit. That makes me concerned as well. In terms of speed, Matthew, I just want to ask you this question. What is on the table for speed on Santa Cruz? Whether you're including it in the grant or not. What was recommended to control speed?
Yeah, so for controlling speeds, similar to the Sand Hill Road corridor, the radar speed feedback sign is also recommended on this corridor.
Okay. So I think you all probably know this, but speed is a really significant issue on Santa Cruz, and we also have the thing where people kind of gun their engines and go crazy and stuff like that, because there really isn't a stop right from. Let's see, where's the first? Oh my goodness, there actually isn't a stop sign. Okay, there's a stop sign at Orange. And then University. University has a signal, right, but there isn't another stop sign. Am I right about that?
Right after University.
Right. There's no stop sign on Santa Cruz when you go toward downtown from Orange. That's pretty incredible. There's no stop sign. I understand there's things like a flashing beacon at Cotton. There's a signal at Elder. There's a signal obviously at University. But where I see people go insane is between Olive-ish all the way down to University is just people put the pedal down. So I have thought about this a lot, and I want to make clear that I am highly, highly, strongly recommending a stop sign at Santa Cruz Avenue in San Mateo. The stop sign we put in at San Mateo and Middle is on the exact same bike path corridor. It connects, as you can see, how if you were biking on San Mateo and you cross Santa Cruz and you're going down there, you just short of this map, you're immediately hitting Middle. Yes. So it to me, we put a stop sign at San Mateo and Middle. I have gotten so much positive feedback about that stop sign from so many people in this neighborhood that it really, really has helped with the safety and speed on Middle that had a similar length of road without any stop sign at all. And my concern about not, so what I'm trying to say is that then we have Santa Cruz crossing with San Mateo, and it's a busier and faster street, probably, well, certainly busier than Middle, possibly faster in traffic. I think a stop sign there is sort of long overdue. This is where I see the most behavior of cars blazing through. Even though there is a flashing beacon, happens all the time with me, people just are going too fast. And that is such a frequently used bike network, people coming from Stanford, et cetera. Bikes are going back and forth on, crossing Santa Cruz on San Mateo all the time. So I do not think it's enough. I think that something about like a bulb out on the southwest corner or whatever. It's just, or I don't even know what else was suggested here. I'm sorry. A crosswalk on the west leg of Santa Cruz, sure, but that is not going to slow down traffic, and it's not going to make that safe. So I really think a lot more, the stop sign is what's needed. Okay. The other things I wanted to mention, Matthew, were, okay, so I noticed that the column need additional analysis. The two potential left turn restrictions fell into need additional analysis. And I understand why you'd want to gather more analysis on that, but I strongly support the left turn restriction to Santa Cruz coming out of St. Raymond. And I strongly support left turn restriction to Johnson during school hours. I think I was not thinking about left turn restrictions, but the minute I read those two, it was like, absolutely seeing. So if you're going down Santa Cruz toward downtown, you can't make a left on Johnson, which is right at the Menlo Church. And that is, I mean, I don't know everyone else, but I felt like one of the most difficult aspects of the walk audit was observing the traffic behavior, the car behavior around St. Raymond Catholic Elementary and the car behavior at Johnson. That was, to me, it made me really nervous. I thought we were going to see a kid get hit. I felt like people were like, whoop, they were just trying to like jump in front of the kid and make the biker and make those turns. And it looked really dangerous to me.
I wonder if the private school aspect means they've been driving longer and they're a little bit more, you know what I mean? Whereas if you're coming to one of these local schools, you've been driving about 8 blocks. But if you've been negotiating the freeway and negotiating Willow, and now you're trying to I just wonder if that drives some of that extra aggravated behavior.
Yeah, I mean, if this happens, I'm happy to participate as a commissioner, but if there's some outreach we can do to St. Raymond, I was confused by the fact that driveway coming out of St. Raymond is a 2-way driveway. But during the period of time in the morning when we were observing drop off, there were 2 lanes of cars coming out. So you had all these cars flooding out of there. And I think it would be worth sitting down with the school. Okay, I think that's all. Like everyone else here, all the other commissioners, I do really urge you, Matthew, as you look at this to, get as much in that grant as possible so we can move forward with some of these amazing suggestions and recommendations. Absolutely.
I also want to thank you for super complete report. Like I really enjoyed it felt a little bit like a thesis. Like there was a whole history chapter and then the research chapter and then what we were doing next. So I really appreciate it. I love the sort of safe systems approach. I think one thing I wrote down, because I just want to clarify for myself, those low cost systemic countermeasures, that list, do I understand that we are using that list like every time we do a new intersection and kind of putting what's applicable off that list at every intersection we redo? Is that what that means? Okay.
Yeah, so there is a list in the report. Our Vision Zero action plan also has a countermeasure toolbox. And so we leverage that as well. And we do already try to apply a lot of those countermeasures whenever we can across the city.
Okay, I really like that. I also want to say that the bit in there about the street stories, because there are a lot of near misses. I know because the number of times I screech to a halt so somebody turning right doesn't hit me, like you're not capturing any of that, right? And so like the time that my husband, somebody clips his tire, like he's fine, she's fine, everybody goes their way. And
Yeah.
so I would love for us, if we're really going to use the data that's captured here,
Mhm.
I would love for us to be publicizing this to schools and like parents and safe routes,
Mhm,
because
mhm.
it would be awesome if we had better data on what's really happening and not just what's happening when someone needs an ambulance.
100%. Is Street Story an app?
It seemed like it was something, it was a link inside the report. It's like a website.
Right, there's a website. It'd be
That
super
Berkeley
cool if it were an
seems to
app.
be using, but you can like put in your town. I clicked on
Right,
it and you
right.
can like put in your information about your town. And clearly they have some information from Menlo Park, but it seemed like not many. And I will tell you
Yeah.
that we clearly just don't know there's a place we can share.
Right, right. That's a good, really
Because
great
there's
point.
not only two.
Okay, so more.
Anyway, so I really liked that. And I frankly really liked the bit, and maybe it's just, I'm gonna glow for a minute about how we're on Vision Zero, because it must just be that. But the safe systems approach, where when we look at accidents, we're not just figuring out who the insurance company should bill, but we're actually like looking at it to see what went wrong so that we can make it better next time. And I really like that as being part of our sort of systemic way of going about things. I think that's, oh, and the very last question I have is, what are truncated domes?
Oh, it's that yellow.
Yeah, these would be for accessibility.
It's like this.
At curb ramps, truncated domes would help people with visibility challenges to identify that they're entering a roadway.
Okay.
So it's an ADA element.
All right, thank you. I was puzzling through that.
I so appreciate people's comments around like, how can we do more bike education of drivers, and how can we get more reporting through Street Story? And I'm taking careful notes because I want to come back to those and maybe put them on the agenda or figure out how to get subcommittees working on those, because I think a lot of these ideas are so great. Was there anything else?
Oh, can I have one more?
Yes.
It's mostly just to also agree with everything that I think we've set up here and you brought up, Sally, is I also really want to know what we're going to do about speed. Like I hear that there are some options and I know that there seem to be some new rules around the 85th percentile, but when I like read through this report, which captures so nicely some of the impacts of speed, and I remember all of the Middle Avenue outreach and the number of people in the comments who said they never saw any bikers on Middle, right? Or they only see a biker in the morning or the afternoon. And granted, that's what they want to see, but also now that we know that we speed throughout town too much, and that speeding reduces your peripheral vision, like maybe that's why they don't see the bikers. Like, so anyway, it was just interesting noting all the people who were telling me that bikers weren't there when I like know that they are, and then pondering if maybe that's part of the reason. So I am super encouraged to hear us going, trying to figure out how to solve that. That's it.
I now I realize I have two more comments, but it's getting late, so I'll be very, very quick. One is that I think there were some lessons learned from Middle. Certainly there were on the commission's side. And one of them, two of them I want to mention really quickly. Matthew, I know there was this reference to parking on Olive. And if there's any interest by the city staff to look into that further, I would say like start now to track it. Because when we went into Middle, if you are making a difficult proposal, might affect or inconvenience some residents, then it's really important to have data. So if there's bandwidth to, maybe be taking, downloading, screenshots from Google Earth or something at regular intervals to see what the usage is, I would suggest that. The other thing we learned, among many things from Middle, was public outreach. That's why I was asking so many questions of Atherton, is because I think I've talked to Commissioner Allman about this, but I think it would be a really good idea to put together kind of a set of best practices around public outreach that we, depending on the scale of the project and et cetera, we can utilize. And I think Kevin Rennie, who is one of the public commenters, had a good point, which was like, make sure you're getting feedback from other areas of Menlo Park, because like Middle, Santa Cruz is a corridor that is used by so many people, certainly not just the people who live around there. I mean, there's so many kids commuting to Hillview from like many places around the city. And it led me to want to just ask or suggest that, and obviously Meredith's the expert here, not me, but maybe there's a way we could do more, or not before the grant, but expand the way we collect feedback about biking at Hillview in specific as we do this project. I know, we reached out to some like Safe Routes for School folks, but I mean, do we interview the kids? Do we survey the kids? Maybe we think a little bit about how to make sure we're hearing from all people, all parties, and parents too, maybe around the Santa Cruz experience going to Hillview. That's it.
I mean, on the feedback stuff, I would think that's a question that's asked a lot, how to get feedback from people that drive or kids, and is there a kind of a best practices? Is there some reference or something, or a template or something that we could be using to try to get that feedback? That question has to be asked by other folks, I would think.
Yeah.
I thought maybe Atherton themselves got some ideas.
Yeah, I think we can pull something together and discuss it as a group, get feedback from the public. Okay, excellent. So Kevin, I don't know if there's a motion here. Don't think so.
No, we're not requiring a motion tonight from the commission. Just appreciate all the feedbacks that you have given us. Really
Sure.
appreciate that. Yeah.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to E4, which is evaluate commission subcommittees to support city council and commission priorities. So this is wrapping up. I know we've talked about this in the past couple of meetings, but we just want to make sure that we're all set on the subcommittees and the people and the staffing of the subcommittees. There were some, people were absent in a couple meetings over the summer, so I just want to make sure that anyone who is absent knows what we're thinking. Kevin, are you going to introduce this item?
Yes, thank you very much. Just wanted to pop up this page here in front of you folks. Really just a kind of a quick summary of the subcommittees that we have established and members that have elected to join those subcommittees. Just a quick summary for the dais here. Again, just looking for one confirmation that this is a well comprehensive and thought out list. And of course, there's always going to be opportunities for us to come back and revise, add members, subtract members, add subtract groups as necessary. Again, I want to emphasize not much work on staff's end to add it to our agenda to do this. So anytime that there's a desire to add, subtract, I'm more than happy to do so on a monthly basis, really. So yeah, but no additional questions unless the dais has any question for staff.
I do want to quickly clarify that I did reach out to Elizabeth King, who's on vacation. As you can see, she's on Middle Avenue, and she asked to also be on Middlefield Road. So she's increased her involvement. And I asked if it's okay with everyone. If not, if someone else wants to do this, totally fine. But I asked to be put on Vision Zero with Brian and Matthew. But I can absolutely, someone else can do that if they'd like to. And Jackie, we thought you might be interested in the bike rack one, but we weren't sure.
I'm certainly happy. Sorry, I'm certainly
something else?
happy to be on the bike rack subcommittee because I made enough noise about it. I feel like I sort of feel obligated to, but also, if not, like, I'm happy. I see I'm on Safe Routes, and I'm like, I'm so integrally connected to Safe
Yes,
Routes that I
yes.
feel weird not being on it. So,
Yes.
and then absent that, like, you mentioned Middlefield Road.
Yeah.
So what I would probably do if I
Yeah.
were choosing between
Sure.
Middlefield Road and the bike rack subcommittee, I would probably choose Middlefield Road.
That's
only
great.
because it seems like if it's a bike rack audit, like I'm going to be fully supportive, but
Sure,
I don't
sure.
need to be.
Okay. So what I would suggest is to pop me off Middlefield Road, remove me from that one because King went on, and have it be King, Cibrian and Iracomos.
Okay.
And then if it's okay with everyone else, I know that Liz didn't want to be on it, but it's okay with everyone else. And Raskoff's already on it. The person's not here. I'll join Vision Zero.
Okay. Can I ask another quick question, just as it relates to the bike rack subcommittee? Maybe I'll wait till,
No.
I'll
please
wait
go
till
ahead.
the end. It's not
Well,
connected to subcommittees.
Okay.
So
Does
I just-
anyone have
The bike racks.
anything
maybe.
else about? Oh, I did want to bring up one thing. So I was proven wrong by a link to the YouTube video of last time's meeting, but I thought we had agreed to take out the words "to schools," that it was just Safe Routes Subcommittee. Because I think that subcommittee was the one that would eventually look at the network of bike ped
Right.
in the city. So I was like, oh, Kevin, let's take out the words "to school," but apparently we didn't resolve that in the last meeting, but
Oh,
I don't know if you agree, just if it.
I thought we kind
I
of
thought we did.
landed on taking out
I
to
thought we did
school,
too,
but
yeah.
it may have been that we took out to school in some place inside of our work plan, but that didn't
Translate.
fall all the way down
Okay.
to changing it here. But if we changed it somewhere in our work plan, it seems like it should be fairly
Yes, yes,
simple
yes.
to align this
You're
to
right,
what the
it
work
was there.
plan said.
I would take it out because I think that this is a good group and a good committee to eventually really look at that network of bike and ped around the city. I think it's really essential that we don't defer that too much. So, okay. So we've agreed, summary here is that we've agreed to take me off Middlefield Road and add King and Cibrian. And we've agreed to take out the words "to school" from Safe Routes Subcommittee. And we've agreed to put me on Vision Zero. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So that is that, let's see, excuse me. Oh, Matthew.
Through the chair. So, oh, sorry. Yeah. I think you were going to go for public comments. So perfect. Thank
Yes,
you.
that's what I was going to do, right? Yeah? Okay.
Yes.
Any clarifying questions from the commission before I take public comment? Okay. Matthew, please call for public comment on this item.
Yes, thank you, Chair. For virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment, you may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. I see one virtual hand from Adina.
Hello, if it's not too loud, I'm walking by Alcina Real. Wanted to express gratitude to the commission for looking at safe routes more broadly. For example, in the discussion earlier in the evening, there were a number of sign treatments and safety improvements that were done with the Safe Routes to Stanford in mind, rather than a Safe Routes to School for children. And that is a kind of thinking that is good and healthy. So I'm very glad that the commission is thinking along those lines. Second thought, and this is looking forward for the coming year and time windows. And this is something that is a little bit of a blast from the past and something that the commission did earlier that then kind of went to sleep during the pandemic. This has to do with parking and access downtown because thanks to in the housing element, the city council is going to be considering deeply affordable housing using downtown parking lots. And that is going to re-raise issues about access downtown and parking. And our parking in our downtown area is significantly more lightly managed than other cities in our area. And this is something that some Complete Streets consideration would be very helpful. And I don't know whether that's something that the whole commission or whether folks might want to even have a committee to look into it, as in days of yore when that was a live issue in the past. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Well, we could do a motion approving the changes we discussed. Kevin, would you like us to do a motion for that? I think so.
Yeah, I think we probably can just do a acclamation. I think most
Okay.
folks here are probably, yeah, so through acclamation, we can just proceed with that. Yep, thank
Okay.
you.
Perfect. Yes, please. Sure.
Say, Kevin, do you remember getting that email from Laura Mellahan with very well thought out, well intended PowerPoint, 30-point PowerPoint slide, 30-slide, well, I mean, really well thought out about Visions Zero and related to college and stuff. Do you get, so two questions. So what happened is she sent it to Matt and I because we're part of Vision Zero. And I also think she copied you, Kevin.
Yep.
So just from a Vision Zero point of view and from a commissioner point of view, one is I want to be sure there is, I don't know, she got a response from you or an engagement from you. I want to be sure that she did, because I feel strong that, I mean, there's the amount of work that went into that, but just generally, when we get emails directly to the commission, how do we respond? And how do we maintain the, encourage and maintain the enthusiasm for a community member, especially one that spent as much time as Laura spent? So I appreciate your comments.
Yeah, no, definitely. So yeah, very much appreciate the thought process that went behind the email. I did connect with Laura via phone conversation, and we had a good dialogue about some of the observations that she had, some suggestions, immediate things that we could do versus, more far-term items that may be able to roll into the Middle Avenue project or perhaps isolated by itself. So certainly we had a follow-up is to answer your.
So she got some attention.
Right. Yeah. So we definitely had a quick follow-up, a phone conversation through that whole process. And I would say, generally speaking, I always encourage the commissioners to, if somebody engages the commissioner in various level on any topics, first and foremost, if you wanted to, let staff know, we're more than happy to help you out with some of the responses that you can provide them. Generally speaking, we can provide you with updates on, what's going on those streets, if something is going on, what they are. We can even take it over if you would like us to. We can reach out to those residents that reach out to you, hear their concerns firsthand, and then hopefully at that time provide some responses, either something we can do immediately or maybe something in the near term or far term. So again, I definitely don't want to come across as in the commissioners can't communicate with the residents. That is by no means what
I had one goal, just be sure she got some response, because the thing was pretty well thought out.
Yeah, no, and some of the, I think generally speaking, and as you kind of heard from Matthew's presentation as well, we're definitely attacking this from all ends, right? We have corridor studies, middle field, where it's a long stretch of a corridor, and we're looking at it systematically, versus the effort that he's working on as well, where the Vision Zero implementation plan, where we're looking at specific intersections, right, where a larger corridor is not being covered. So we're definitely trying to assess and really looking at each location from various points of view. Either it's a corridor study, either it's an isolated study, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I understand that, it's certainly a little bit frustrating in terms of the process and the speed of which it's moving forward. I certainly recognize that, and the frustration that residents and many folks felt. We as staff definitely felt that as well. So
my point is kind of like a more of a macro point, that here she just that she was responded to. And then we do, what can I do to help encourage and react to it so it's a positive experience? I think most people understand it's going to take time.
Yeah.
But just there was obviously a lot of goodwill in it, and just how to encourage that goodwill and continue to look for ways of getting the community engaged, because there was a perfect example.
Yeah.
Setting aside the specifics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one thing that you as commissioners certainly benefited from that residents are not getting is kind of that behind the scene look almost. You understand so the process that goes into a city going through a project, right? From beginning, planning, design to implementation, some of the community outreach that they have talked about that's typically associated with transportation projects that are lengthier than some folks would like, but is a necessary requirement and something that we certainly want to make sure that we address all the community needs. So I think having that dialogue between the commissioners and those residents, that kind of behind the scene look, I think is also pretty crucial because sometimes coming from the staff, it's not necessarily, being perceived as in, I think you're just trying to come up with an excuse versus coming from the commissioners. I think it holds more weight, I think. Cool.
Okay, well, we will move on to informational items. This portion of the meeting, city staff provides an update on matters of importance to the commission. They're not action items, however, so a commissioner, city staff member of the public may request to make a comment or ask a question on any of the informational items. The first one is update on major project status. Kevin, do you have any updates?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things I would like to update the commission on. First one is project related. So some of you, maybe all of you might be attuned to this, but back in May or so, April, staff went to the city council with a list of streets where we proposed to lower the speed limit.
Yes.
Which, okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods, so that's great. So, since then, the policy, the assembly bill that really allow us local agencies to further look into lowering speed limits has now been in effect. Effectively, it was on July 1st was when it went into effect. Since then, we've been kind of working in the background, procuring the necessary signages, talking to our crews and contractors, et cetera. So I'm happy to announce that we have been able to since then implement a couple of the streets lowering the speed limits essentially. So one on Ravenswood and one on Bay. We'll continue to do so for the rest of the remaining streets. There are a couple of them where it requires coordination with other agencies, for example, Valparaiso with the town, and then the rest of Santa Cruz from essentially Orange to halfway towards the Y, because that stretch of Santa Cruz is halfway city right away, halfway county. So working with the county on that stretch as well. So, happy to answer any questions. That we do have there's a list of streets that we'll identify in the staff report. So happy to share that staff report with you guys all offline if
That would be
desired.
excellent. Thank you as a reminder. Yep. Thank you.
Yep. So that's happy to announce that we're moving forward and we'll continue to do so in the next few months or so, or next few weeks, I mean. The second item is actually a community event that I want to share with you all. I believe I sent an email to you already, but our library staff is hosting a leisure bike ride this Saturday.
I don't think I saw an email about that.
From 10 a.m. to 11. It's going to go from our Menlo Park Library, and then we're going to bike our way to the new Bellhaven Community Campus, which has our new library there. So along the way, they're making stops at the little libraries, those nice looking tree library homes. So anyone that's interested in having a bike ride Saturday morning, welcome you to join our library staff. So with that, I will conclude my announcements. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin.
Can I ask a couple of questions?
Yeah.
They're sort of related to announcements. One of them is, I seem to recall whatever the last meeting I was at, which wasn't, this is August now, right? It wasn't July, I think it was June. There was going to be a change coming to the Bellhaven on Willow, the intersection, and they were going to change the signal priorities. And I feel like I thought it was going to switch to where Newbridge went left first.
Newbridge and Willow?
Uh-huh.
Right, yes. So I believe, so yes, that's the original plan, still going to be the plan. However, we did encounter a couple, what's the word I'm looking for? Unforeseen hiccups with the devices out there. So continue to try to resolve those issues. But yes, the plan is still to make those improvements at the Willow and Newbridge signal so that way we have a dedicated left turn
Got it.
instead of some of the operations currently where the left turn and the pedestrians with the conflicting left turn and pedestrians are going simultaneously. Yeah,
Right.
so that is
Got it.
continue to be the goal, and we'll be able to. It unfortunately it's a little bit of a delay, but we do intend to execute that eventually.
Awesome. Thank you. I remember there being a date and then I
Mhm.
came back from vacation and I was like, they look just like they were before. And so I need to ask. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about is I'm trying to see if it's just my imagination. Is there a new bike rack at Nealon Park? Oh, because I feel like there's a bike rack by the playground now and it was full of bikes and I just, either I totally overlooked it or it's just new, but maybe I just
Should we ask
overlooked
Parks
it.
and Rec? Would Parks and Rec know that?
Yeah, if there's a new bike rack, I will give full credit to our Park and
Okay.
Rec department or our street crews department.
Well,
I am-
awesome, because either I totally overlooked it or there's a new one there and it's already full of bikes. Which
Right,
is kind of
yeah,
exciting,
yeah.
so.
Yeah, sometimes our
Thanks.
street crews are very good at responding to that type of request. So yeah, kudos to them if it's out there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's really all I had. Thank you so much.
Matthew, can you ask for public comments on this item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. For virtual attendees who wish to provide public comment, you may engage the raised hand feature, or if you're calling in from a landline or cell phone, press *9 to raise your virtual hand. If you're participating in person, please wait for the chair to call your name. You can then step up to the podium to make your comment. Seeing no virtually raised hands, I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Kevin, would you like to proceed with agenda item tentative Complete Streets Commission agenda?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. No additional comments or
Okay.
feedback unless there's any questions from the commission.
Thank you. Matthew, I will not call for public comment on that. All right, last one here is committee and subcommittee reports. I know we don't have any because we just established the subcommittees, but I did want to get quick feedback from my fellow commissioners. I had an idea about maybe doing a template of a work plan that the subcommittees can fill in for the year, just very simple kind of goals and, agreeing on maybe rough time frames and things. Okay, good. I'll put together a template, circulate it, see what you think. And with that, we're going to adjournment at 9:19. This was a long meeting. Thank you very much for your time. I thought it was really productive and helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.